Spellbound for the holidays. A magical fake dating holiday rom-com with curses, chaos, and love. By Wynne Valentine. Copyright 2024 by Wynne Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities, is entirely coincidental. Wynne Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Designations used by companies to distinguish their products are often claimed as trademarks. All brand names and product names used in this book and on its cover are trade names, service marks, trademarks, and registered trademarks of their respective owners. The publishers and the book are not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. None of the companies referenced within the book have endorsed the book. Book cover by Dana Sacco. Audio by Google Play. Chapter 1: A Matchmaking Proposal. Scarlett Harper stretched on her tiptoes, directing her wand at the stubborn holiday garland that refused to hang quite right above her office window. "A little to the left," she muttered, flicking her wrist. The enchanted greenery wiggled in protest, before settling into a perfectly festive swoop. Behind her, her favorite enchanted quill scratched away at a fresh piece of parchment, documenting the latest successful match between two of her clients. The sound mixed pleasantly with the soft holiday music drifting from the enchanted gramophone in the corner, creating the perfect cozy atmosphere she strived for at Enchanted Connections. The hearthstone on her desk pulsed with a warm rose glow as she settled into her chair to review the growing stack of completed matches. Marcus and Penelope, 3 months and already talking about moving in together. She smiled, adding a small heart to their file. The stone's light strengthened, filling the office with a comforting warmth that mingled with the perpetual scent of cinnamon and pine she maintained through a network of carefully placed enchanted candles. The shop's bell chimed with its signature musical tinkle, and Scarlett didn't need to look up to know who had arrived. The distinctive click of dragon-hide boots and swish of expensive robes announced her mother's presence better than any magical herald. "Darling, your window display is looking a touch pedestrian. Perhaps we should add some enchanted snow globes? The ones that predict romantic futures?" Marian Harper swept in, her emerald robes shimmering with tiny embedded stars. Her charm bracelet flashed a bright, excited orange that matched her enthusiastic smile. "Mother, the display is fine. Not everyone wants their romantic future broadcast to the entire street." Scarlett gestured to her organized chaos of scrolls and magical instruments. "I prefer a more subtle approach." Marian's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched as she surveyed the collection of love potions, compatibility crystals, and floating relationship charts. "Subtle. Yes, I can see that." Her eyes lingered on the stack of successful match files. "Though I must say, you seem to be quite talented at finding love for everyone, except—" "Don't." Scarlett held up a hand. "We are not having this conversation again." With a dramatic flourish, Marian conjured an elaborate invitation into existence. Enchanted frost sparkled across its surface, forming delicate patterns that seemed to dance in the hearthstone's glow. "The Yuletide Gala is in 3 weeks, darling." The enchanted quill, which had been diligently noting client details, dropped mid-sentence with an audible plop. Scarlett stared at the invitation as if it might bite her. "The entire magical community will be watching," Marian continued, her voice taking on that particular tone that always made Scarlett feel like she was 12 again. Especially after last year's unfortunate incident with the enchanted punch bowl. "That was not my fault. How was I supposed to know it would start matching people based on their drink preferences. 3 divorces, Scarlett. 3. Marian's charm bracelet shifted to a stern red as she perched herself on the edge of Scarlett's desk. You simply cannot show up alone this year. Think of the family reputation. And what about your business? What kind of message does it send when the town's premier matchmaker can't find her own match? I'm just too busy helping others find love to focus on my own romantic adventures. Scarlett attempted a light laugh, but it came out more like a nervous hiccup. Without realizing it, she started humming "Deck the Halls" under her breath, a habit that always betrayed her discomfort. They faced off beside the Hearthstone, which responded to their tension by dimming to an uncomfortable gray. Marian's bracelet pulsed an alarming shade of crimson. What about Theodore Blackwood? Marian's voice softened as she reached out to straighten Scarlett's slightly askew holly pin. He's quite accomplished in defensive magic. Or perhaps Julian Frost. His family's apothecary is very well respected. Mother. Oh. What about that lovely Whitmore boy? The one who specializes in transformative enchantments? He turned himself into a toad last month. Permanently. Well, that's unfortunate. Marian's fingers fussed with Scarlett's braid. But surely there must be someone suitable. The Hendersons have a son about your age. Fine. Scarlett threw up her hands in surrender. Fine. I'll find someone to accompany me to the gala. Just, please stop listing every eligible warlock in town. Marian's charm bracelet immediately shifted to a pleased pink. Wonderful. I'll leave you to it then. She swept toward the door, pausing only to add, do try to find someone before next week's tea with the Coven Ladies Society. You know how they love to gossip. As the bell chimed her mother's exit, Scarlett slumped in her chair with a groan. Above her desk, the enchanted mistletoe, which she'd been successfully avoiding all morning, drifted mockingly lower, sending down a shower of sparkly pollen that made her sneeze. Scarlett paced her office, the enchanted mistletoe following her movements like an overeager puppy. Her professional matchmaker's notebook floated nearby, pages flipping frantically as if sharing her agitation. This is ridiculous, she muttered, sending another magical message orb spinning into existence. Like the previous 6 attempts, this one fizzled into sparkles before reaching its destination. Why is he so hard to contact? Poppy lounged across a stack of client files, her scales shifting between amused gold and exasperated blue. Because he's cursed, the tiny dragon offered helpfully. Also, you're trying too hard. Your magic gets sparkly when you're nervous. I am not nervous. Scarlett protested, as the nearest candle flared in response to her emotions. I'm simply strategizing. The dragon snorted, sending a small puff of glitter-infused smoke toward the ceiling. Right? That's why you've rewritten the same message 7 times? Scarlett glanced at her notebook, where multiple versions of "we should meet" had been crossed out with increasing force. The latest attempt read simply, "coffee," before dissolving into an agitated doodle of storm clouds. Fine, she sighed, dropping into her chair. The mistletoe seized its chance, drifting lower until she swatted it away. What would you suggest? Poppy's scales brightened to a mischievous gold. Well, he's always at the enchanted cup around 3. Very predictable for a chaos-cursed warlock. Always sits in the shadow Y corner, drinks black coffee that never gets cold. Scarlett's quill paused mid-scratch. How do you know his coffee habits? I'm very observant, Poppy said primly, then added under her breath, also I may have tried to steal his spoon once. Or twice. Poppy. What? It was very shiny. Scarlett buried her face in her hands, but her mind was already racing. The enchanted cup was neutral territory, public enough to be professional, but casual enough for a business proposition. And if Poppy's intel was correct, though she'd have to address the silverware theft later, she knew exactly when to find him. Right then. She stood, straightening her holly pin with determination. Time to be proactive. You're going to ambush him at the cafe, aren't you? I prefer to think of it as a strategically timed business meeting. Scarlett gathered her notes, pointedly ignoring Poppy's knowing smirk. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? The dragon's scales shifted to an alarming shade of fuchsia. With his curse? Do you want that list alphabetically, or by property damage estimates? But Scarlett was already heading for the door, her mind whirling with possibilities. Behind her, the mistletoe made one final attempt to follow, before slumping in defeat. This should be fun, Poppy chirped, launching from her perch to catch up. Just remember, if anything shiny goes missing during the chaos, I had nothing to do with it. The office door closed behind them with a musical chime, leaving the mistletoe to bob forlornly in their wake. The enchanted quill made a sympathetic scratching sound, before noting in elegant script, Operation Cursebreak, Day 1, what could possibly go wrong? Grayson watched the ripples in his eternally warm coffee, counting the concentric circles as they spread outward from where a novice witch's levitation spell had just spectacularly failed. The resulting magical backlash had sent vibrations through the entire cafe, though his shadowy corner remained relatively undisturbed. Just the way he liked it. All I'm saying is a little variety wouldn't kill you, Milo croaked from his perch on the adjacent chair, his black feathers ruffled with conviction. The gingerbread latte actually brings good fortune. You could use some of that. Rune, ever the voice of reason, tilted his head thoughtfully. Or it could interact poorly with the curse, and turn the entire drink into actual gingerbread. Remember the hot chocolate incident of 22? That was one time, Milo protested. And everyone agreed the marshmallows made excellent building materials. Grayson took another sip of his coffee, letting the familiar bickering wash over him. A floating teacup drifted past their table, wobbling precariously as it approached. Right on cue, the delicate china crashed to the floor the moment it entered his curse's radius. The magical paintings adorning the walls dimmed slightly, their enchanted figures seeking shelter in their painted backgrounds. Just another normal morning at the Enchanted Cup, he muttered, reaching for the black quartz crystal in his pocket. Its smooth surface offered little comfort, but the habit was ingrained after so many years. The sudden cessation of Milo and Rune's squabbling drew his attention. He looked up to find a tall woman with striking auburn hair striding purposefully toward his table. A tiny dragon with golden-hued scales perched on her shoulder, surveying the cafe like a queen overlooking her domain. "You're exactly what I need," she announced, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation. An enchanted notebook floated alongside her, flipping open to a pristine page with a flourish. Grayson arched an eyebrow, a sarcastic retort forming on his lips. "I seriously doubt your powers of observation if you—" A clatter interrupted him, as the dragon familiar's tail knocked into a passing server's tray of enchanted pastries. The baked goods took flight, spinning lazily through the air around their heads like sugary planets in orbit. "Mine," the tiny dragon declared, launching herself after a particularly sparkly frosted moon muffin. "Poppy, no." The woman reached up to snatch a floating scone, her cheeks flushing. "I am so sorry about this." "Excellent first impression," Milo cackled, dodging a rogue Danish. Grayson plucked a levitating muffin from the air and set it on the table, watching as the woman, Scarlett, attempted to restore order. Her movements were graceful despite the chaos, and there was something oddly compelling about the way she handled the situation with both embarrassment and determination. "So," she said, finally corralling the last pastry, "about why I'm here. I run Enchanted Connections, and I need a date for the Yuletide Gala. You need help researching your curse. I propose a mutually beneficial arrangement." Grayson's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "How do you know about my curse?" "Please," she rolled her eyes. "Everyone knows about the mysterious cursed warlock who haunts the Enchanted Cup. And I've done my research." "Oh, this is going to be fantastic." Milo hopped excitedly on his chair back. "Say yes. Think of the chaos." Rune shuffled his feathers nervously. Need I remind everyone that mixing curses with matters of the heart rarely ends well? The magical backlash alone could. As if to emphasize his point, the cafe's enchanted lanterns flickered ominously overhead, casting dancing shadows across their table. A few nearby patrons glanced up nervously and shifted their chairs away. You see? Grayson gestured at the lanterns. This is what happens in my general vicinity. And you want to bring this to a formal gala. Scarlett leaned forward, her green eyes bright with determination. The Harper family library has one of the most extensive collections of curse-breaking literature in the region. Help me with the gala, and I'll help you research a solution. What do you have to lose? My dignity? What's left of my reputation? The structural integrity of the venue? He touched the crystal in his pocket again, weighing his options. Scarlett waited expectantly, her notebook quivering slightly in anticipation. Poppy had returned to her shoulder, golden scales shimmering as she munched on her purloined muffin. Even Milo and Rune had fallen silent, watching the exchange with uncharacteristic interest. The smart thing would be to refuse. To stay in his corner with his perpetually warm coffee, and avoid any situation that might make his curse worse. But something in Scarlett's expression, that mix of hope and stubborn determination, made him hesitate. Finally, he let out a resigned sigh. Fine, but when this inevitably goes wrong, remember that I warned you. Milo exchanged a meaningful look with Poppy, while Rune simply shook his head in resignation. Above them, the magical lanterns gave one final flicker, as if marking the moment everything changed. Chapter 2: A Fake Date in Progress. Scarlett unlocked Enchanted Connections, just as the enchanted snowflakes began their morning dance across Evergreen Hollow. The shop's crystals brightened at her presence, casting warm rainbow patterns across the wooden floors. She hummed "Deck the Halls" under her breath while arranging client scrolls on her desk, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach. It's just a business arrangement, she told the nearest crystal, which pulsed skeptically in response. The bell above the door chimed at precisely 8 o'clock. Grayson stepped inside, his dark coat dusted with magical frost that sparkled like tiny stars. He looked annoyingly handsome with his perpetually tousled hair and that brooding expression that made half her clients swoon whenever he passed the shop window. You're punctual, Scarlett said, straightening a stack of parchments. That's a good start for a fake boyfriend. I aim to exceed your presumably low expectations. He brushed frost from his shoulders, and it evaporated into tiny hearts before disappearing. Scarlett pretended not to notice. A flash of iridescent scales caught her eye as Poppy emerged from her cozy nook behind the hearthstone. The miniature dragon's scales shifted from sleepy blue to alert gold as she spotted Grayson, or more specifically, the black quartz crystal hanging from his neck. Mine, Poppy declared, launching herself across the room. Poppy, no. Scarlett lunged to intercept her kleptomaniac companion, but the dragon was already circling Grayson's head, making grabby motions at his necklace. Interesting pet, Grayson drawled, ducking as Poppy made another pass. She's not a pet. She's my familiar, and usually better behaved. Scarlett shot Poppy a warning look. Down, you little magpie. Poppy landed on a nearby shelf, her scales turning a sulky red. Not a magpie. Dragon. Big difference. Scarlett pulled out a fresh contract scroll, desperate to get back on track. Let's establish some ground rules for this arrangement. Her enchanted quill hovered ready as she began listing items. First, no real feelings. This is strictly business. Trust me, that won't be a problem, Grayson said dryly. Second, we need to appear convincingly in love at the gala. That means coordinated outfits, appropriate displays of affection, and... She paused as a suspicious rustling sound came from behind her. Poppy was attempting to stealth crawl along the top shelf toward Scarlett's hidden peppermint stash. I can see you, you know. Your tail is hanging down. No, it's not, Poppy insisted, just as her tail knocked against a precariously balanced tower of scrolls. Time seemed to slow as the ancient parchments began their descent. "Catch those?" Scarlett yelped, diving for the nearest ones. Grayson moved to help, but as soon as he stepped forward, one particular scroll began to glow an eerie purple. The text on its surface rippled like water before settling back to normal. Before either of them could investigate, two black shapes swooped through the window. "The cavalry has arrived," announced Milo, Grayson's more vocal familiar. "We saw chaos," Rune added quietly. "We came to help." "Oh no," Grayson muttered. The crow's idea of helping involved diving after Poppy, who had seized the opportunity, and a peppermint candy, to start an aerial chase around the shop. Floating quills scattered like startled fish, trailing ink in elaborate loops across the air. Scarlett watched in horror as her carefully organized workspace descended into mayhem. Worse, her magical instruments were acting strange. The Heartstone's usual steady glow now pulsed like a strobe light, and her enchanted quills were writing everything backwards. "Your curse," she realized, glancing at Grayson. "It's affecting my matchmaking magic." "I did try to warn you." He reached down to pick up the purple scroll, just as Scarlett moved for it. Their fingers brushed and purple sparks crackled between them. They both jerked back as if burned. "Let me see that," Scarlett said, reaching for the scroll again, but Grayson stepped away. "About these couple behaviors we need to practice," he said quickly. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Well, we should probably start with the basics." Standing close together, casual touches, she demonstrated by moving closer, but the shelf of love potions behind them began to rattle ominously. Several bottles clinked against each other in what sounded suspiciously like a warning. "Maybe we should practice that part later," Grayson suggested, taking a careful step back. Scarlett nodded, trying to hide her disappointment as she tucked the mysterious scroll into her desk drawer for later investigation. Above them, Poppy had settled on a chandelier, smugly sharing her stolen peppermint candy with Milo and Rune. "Mine," she declared again, breaking the candy into 3 pieces with her tiny claws. "Yours," Milo agreed, accepting his share while Rune nodded sagely. "Okay, so ground rules," Scarlett announced, spreading a color-coded scroll across her desk. The parchment sparkled faintly, enchanted ink shifting to accommodate her rapid additions. "First, we need a convincing backstory. Mother's going to interrogate us both, and her charm bracelet always knows when someone's lying." Grayson leaned against her office doorframe, looking annoyingly at ease for someone who'd just agreed to fake date a professional matchmaker. "Shouldn't be too hard. We met at the Enchanted Cup. You were captivated by my brooding charm." "I was not captivated," Scarlett protested, as her quill betrayed her by adding little hearts to the margin. She quickly crumpled that section of parchment. "And you weren't brooding, you were sulking." "I was contemplating life's deeper mysteries." "You were hiding from carol singers." "They were very aggressive carol singers." From her treasure pile behind Scarlett's desk, Poppy snorted. "He's got a point. The Enchanted ensemble does get a bit stabby with their conductor's wand." The enchanted mistletoe, sensing an opportunity, began drifting hopefully in their direction. Scarlett banished it to the corner with a flick of her wand. "Focus, please. We need to coordinate our stories before the pre-gala dinner tomorrow night." "Ah yes, the infamous Harper family interrogation." Grayson's familiars swooped in through the window, Milo carrying what appeared to be a stolen Christmas cookie. "Should I expect truth serum in the punch?" "Don't be ridiculous." Scarlett paused. "Though maybe avoid Aunt Cordelia's special eggnog. Last year it made Cousin Edmund propose to a hat rack." "Was the hat rack at least well-bred?" "Pure mahogany, very respectable family." Their shared laugh caught them both off guard. The mistletoe seized its chance, zooming down from the ceiling, but Grayson's curse kicked in at exactly the right moment. The plant suddenly sprouted tiny bells that jingled jingle bells in an off-key minor scale. "That's new," Grayson mused, watching the musical Mistletoe retreat in apparent embarrassment. Your curse has a sense of humor. Scarlett made another note on her scroll. We can work with that. Speaking of working together. Grayson stepped closer, examining her color-coded relationship charts with genuine interest. These are quite impressive. The magical theory behind your matching system is proprietary, Scarlett cut him off, though she couldn't help feeling pleased at his appreciation. And don't change the subject. We need to practice couple behaviors. Milo perked up. Ooh, like dramatic declarations of love? Boss, do the thing with your hair. No one is doing anything with their hair, Scarlett declared, though she noticed Grayson's hand twitch toward his perpetually tousled locks. Just basic couple stuff. Hand-holding, casual touches, finishing each other's. Hexes, Grayson suggested. Sandwiches, I was going to say sandwiches. But she was fighting another smile. When had that started happening? Mine? Poppy suddenly announced, diving for Grayson's black quartz crystal. The resulting chaos sent scrolls flying and caused every enchanted object in the office to start humming, All I Want for Christmas Is You. As they scrambled to restore order, Scarlett caught herself noticing things she shouldn't. How Grayson's eyes crinkled when he laughed, the gentle way he soothed her agitated filing system, how his curse seemed to settle whenever she moved closer. Right, she said briskly, gathering her scattered notes. Meet me at the manor tomorrow at 7. And wear something non-cursed. I'll do my best. He paused at the door. Though I make no promises about the carol singers. They're very persistent this time of year. After he left, Poppy emerged from her hiding spot, scales shifting to a knowing rose gold. You like him? I like that he's helping with my mother's gala ultimatum. Sure. Poppy's tail curled smugly. That's why you're humming All I Want for Christmas under your breath. Scarlett touched her holly pin, refusing to acknowledge how warm her cheeks felt. Don't you have some spoons to steal? Already did. Poppy produced a silver teaspoon with a flourish. The enchanted cup really should invest in better security. The mistletoe, still sporting its musical bells, gave one final hopeful jingle, before settling into what Scarlett could have sworn was a plodding silence. Grayson stood before the Harper family manor, his black quartz crystal thrumming anxiously in his pocket. The enchanted gargoyles perched along the roofline swiveled their stone heads to track his approach, their granite eyes narrowing as the magical wards around the property flickered and sputtered like faulty Christmas lights. They don't bite? Milo offered helpfully from his shoulder. Probably. That's reassuring, Grayson muttered, watching one particularly stern-looking gargoyle bare its fangs. The protective enchantments around the manor rippled again, as he took another step forward. Rune, ever the voice of reason, clicked his beak. The wards sense your curse. Perhaps we should have mentioned that to Scarlett. Because that would have made this whole fake dating scheme so much more appealing. Grayson tugged at his collar, thankful he'd at least managed to tame his perpetually disheveled hair for the occasion. The massive oak door swung open before he could second-guess himself further. Scarlett stood in the entrance, wearing an emerald dress that made her eyes sparkle like fresh holly. Her usual confidence wavered slightly as she took in the flickering wards. So, she said, twisting a charm on her bracelet, I see you've met our security system. Your gargoyles seem charmed to make my acquaintance. Was that an attempt at a pun? A smile tugged at her lips. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Thorn. Milo puffed up his feathers importantly. We've been working on his sense of humor. Baby steps. Scarlett ushered them inside, where the great hall stretched out before them in all its magical splendor. Enchanted evergreen garlands wrapped around marble columns, their needles shifting between silver and gold. Floating candles drifted near the vaulted ceiling, and at the center of it all, emerald flames danced in a massive hearth. Marian Harper held court near the fireplace, her jewel-toned robes catching the green light as she directed floating teacups with elegant flicks of her wand. Her charm bracelet flickered rapidly between curious gold and suspicious red, as she spotted them. "Scarlett, darling. And this must be the mysterious Mr. Thorn." Marian's smile was dazzling and just a touch predatory. In an armchair nearby, Arthur Harper appeared absorbed in an ancient tome bound in midnight blue leather. His fingers absently traced the edge of a silver pocket watch as his sharp eyes darted between the pages and their little group. "Mother, father, this is Grayson Thorn." Scarlett's hand found his arm, squeezing gently. "My boyfriend." "Thorn." Marian's bracelet settled on a wary orange. "Any relation to the thorns of the northern covens? Or perhaps the Shadow Vale branch?" Grayson started, but Marian was already charging ahead. "What's your specialty? Elemental magic? Transformation? Your aura suggests something more complex." She circled him like a festive shark, scenting blood in the water. The curse chose that moment to make its presence known. The enchanted portraits lining the walls began speaking in reverse, their confused subjects walking backward through their frames. "Fascinating effect," Arthur commented mildly, not looking up from his book. A streak of iridescent scales caught Grayson's eye as Poppy darted between floating teacups. The miniature dragon's gaze was locked on Arthur's pocket watch, which glinted temptingly in the firelight. "Perhaps a demonstration?" Marian suggested, though her tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. "Something simple, an illumination charm perhaps?" Grayson reached for his magic just as Poppy made her move. The tiny dragon snatched the pocket watch with surprising stealth, but as she zoomed past Grayson's shoulder, something extraordinary happened. The watch's ancient runes blazed to life, pulsing in perfect synchronization with his black quartz crystal. The simple illumination spell he'd attempted exploded into a shower of dark sparks. "Well," Marian sniffed, "that was certainly unique. Though your form could use some refinement. The proper wrist movement is more of a..." "Mother." Scarlett interrupted as Milo and Rune launched themselves after Poppy, who was now doing victory laps around the enchanted chandelier. Arthur rose from his chair, his expression thoughtful as he watched the pocket watch pulse in time with Grayson's crystal. The older warlock opened his mouth to speak, but Scarlett was already moving. "So sorry, but I just remembered we have that thing. The very important thing we need to do." She tugged Grayson toward the door. "Right now." "But Scarlett," Arthur called after them, already making notes in his tome, "I believe we should discuss." "Later, father." "Much later." As Scarlett pulled him to safety, Grayson glanced back to find Arthur studying him with an expression of knowing concern. The recovered pocket watch, now safely back in the older warlock's possession, pulsed softly in rhythm with the manor's magical wards. Milo landed on Grayson's shoulder, his feathers ruffled. "Well, that went splendidly. Nothing says future son-in-law material like making all the family portraits speak backward." "At least no one caught fire this time," Rune offered diplomatically. Grayson touched his crystal, still warm from its unexpected reaction. Something about Arthur's pocket watch had triggered, what exactly? And why had the older warlock seemed more intrigued than alarmed? Before he could follow that train of thought, Scarlett was already leading him toward the manor's eastern wing, her cheeks flushed with either embarrassment or exhilaration, possibly both. Chapter 3: Lights and Tangles. Scarlett directed her wand at a towering stack of boxes, each one wrapped in shimmering paper that flickered like starlight. "The trick is to let the decorations find their own perfect spot," she explained, levitating the first box toward the great hall's vaulted ceiling. "Our family's been doing it this way since before I was born. So you just release them and hope for the best." Grayson arched an eyebrow, hands tucked into the pockets of his dark coat as he watched the boxes dance through the air. "There's a method to the madness." Scarlett flicked her wrist, and the first box unfurled like a blooming flower, releasing a cascade of crystal icicles that arranged themselves along the windows. "See? Perfect placement." "Mine." Poppy swooped past, trailing a length of silver tinsel that she proceeded to drape over Milo and Rune, who sat perched on a nearby bust of some long-dead Harper ancestor. "Get this sparkly nonsense off me," Milo squawked, shaking his feathers indignantly. Rune merely sighed, looking like a very disgruntled Christmas ornament. The crows exchanged a look that spelled trouble, then took off in perfect sync. They circled the chandelier twice, before dropping a handful of enchanted pine cones. The cones burst into tiny, crackling fireworks around Poppy, who barrel-rolled with an indignant puff of glittery smoke. "Children, please," Scarlett muttered, though she couldn't help smiling at their antics. "Now watch this, it's all about the wrist movement." She demonstrated the charm for the garlands, creating an elegant swish and spiral motion. "The key is to..." The garland suddenly jerked in her magical grip, twisting like a living thing. Scarlett felt the familiar ripple of Grayson's curse, a second too late. "That's not supposed to happen," she managed, just before the greenery sprang to life with decidedly mischievous intent. The garland shot forward, wrapping around both her and Grayson in a tinsel-covered embrace that pulled them chest to chest. "I take it this isn't part of the traditional Harper decorating process?" Grayson's voice was entirely too amused for someone bound in enchanted greenery. "Definitely not." Scarlett tried to maintain her professional demeanor, but it was difficult with his warmth seeping through her sweater and his stormy eyes so close to hers. "Just give me a second to..." "Getting a bit wrapped up in your work, aren't you?" The teasing lilt in his voice sent heat rushing to her cheeks. Her magic flickered with her pulse, and the garlands tightened in response, drawing them even closer together. "That was terrible," she groaned, trying to ignore how her heart skipped when she felt his quiet laugh rumble through his chest. A familiar tingle of magic drew her attention upward, and there it was, the enchanted mistletoe, drifting innocently above their heads like it hadn't just made her predicament 10 times worse. Tiny golden sparks rained down from its leaves, catching in Grayson's dark hair. "Don't you dare look up," she warned, though of course he immediately did. "Ah." His lips curved into that infuriating half-smile. "Your family's decorations are very persistent." Scarlett closed her eyes, trying to focus on wandless magic instead of the intoxicating mix of his cologne and the fresh pine scent surrounding them. "Finite incantatum," she whispered. The garlands responded by bursting into a sparkly rendition of "Deck the Halls." "Fascinating," Grayson murmured far too close to her ear. "I don't suppose this counts as dancing?" "Mine now," Poppy announced from her perch on the banister, her scales shifting to a smug gold color. "Should we help them?" Rune asked quietly. Milo fluffed his feathers, still sporting bits of tinsel. "Are you kidding? This is the most entertainment we've had all week." Something shifted in the air between them, a subtle harmonizing of their magical signatures that made Scarlett's skin tingle. The evergreen wish, displayed proudly on its pedestal across the room, began to pulse with a warm, steady light. She felt the garlands loosen slightly, responding to their synchronized energy. "There," she breathed, working one arm free. "Now if I can just..." "Well, isn't this festive?" Scarlett froze at the sound of her mother's voice. Marian stood in the doorway, her charm bracelet flashing a delighted pink that perfectly matched her knowing smile. "Mother." Scarlett finally managed to untangle herself, though the garland seemed reluctant to let go completely. She straightened her holly pin with as much dignity as she could muster. "We were just..." "Decorating?" Marian's eyes sparkled. "Yes, I can see that." Grayson's quiet laughter sent ripples of magic through the room, making the remaining boxes of decorations dance in their wrappings. Scarlett shot him a glare, but it was hard to maintain her annoyance when he looked so genuinely amused, bits of tinsel still clinging to his dark coat. "The garlands are clearly defective," Scarlett declared, smoothing her sweater. "I'll just start over with..." "Oh no, darling." Marian waved her wand, and the rebellious garland settled perfectly along the banister, though it still hummed a few bars of "Deck the Halls" when Scarlett passed. "I think they've done a wonderful job of bringing people together." Grayson balanced precariously on the enchanted ladder, which hovered a good 15 feet above the manor's marble floor. The string of fairy lights in his hands flickered ominously, already responding to his curse before he'd even managed to hang them. 10 crystals says they explode within 5 minutes, Milo announced from his perch on the carved banister, ruffling his black feathers. Rune, ever the more sensible of his familiars, cocked his head. 15 says they spell out insults in Latin first. Neither of you is helping, Grayson muttered, stretching to reach the elaborate crown molding. The ladder wobbled slightly, and he tightened his grip on the golden strand of lights. Oh, but we are, Milo preened. We're providing essential moral support, through gambling and mockery. It's a time-honored tradition. The lights chose that moment to cycle through a rainbow of colors, bathing the grand staircase in a disco-worthy light show. The portrait of Scarlett's great-great-grandmother let out an affronted gasp. Young man, she scolded from her gilded frame, I have not spent 3 centuries maintaining my dignified pose to be turned into a nightclub attraction. Grayson pinched the bridge of his nose. My sincere apologies, madam. I'm attempting to. Well, I never. Another portrait chimed in. In my day, we decorated with proper enchanted candlelight, none of this gaudy modern nonsense. The criticism only heightened Grayson's frustration, which naturally made his curse flare. The lights suddenly blazed brighter, arranging themselves into perfectly formed letters. Your paintings are extremely last season. Milo read, cackling. In French, no less. Didn't know your curse was multilingual, Thorn. The lights flickered again, this time spelling out what appeared to be a rather rude suggestion in ancient Greek. I don't even speak Greek, Grayson protested, just as the lights switched to Germanic runes. Rune tilted his head thoughtfully. That one's actually quite clever, though anatomically improbable. A surge of magical energy crackled through the strand, causing the entire length to spark like a firework. The previously subdued garland suddenly sprang to life, writhing like verdant serpents. Worse still, the regiment of decorative nutcrackers stationed along the stairs began to twitch. Oh no, Grayson breathed, watching as the first nutcracker clicked its wooden jaw and snapped to attention. The entire squadron of nutcrackers raised their tiny rifles in unison, then began marching in a haphazard formation. Silver tinsel slithered down the banister, forming what appeared to be metallic cobra hoods, while ornaments detached themselves from nearby trees to orbit the chaos like festive planets. Now this, Milo declared, is entertainment worth every crystal. Grayson attempted to maintain some semblance of dignity, while simultaneously entangling himself from the increasingly aggressive light strand and directing traffic around the Nutcracker parade. Left, 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 right, left. No, not you, that's a wall, he called to a particularly enthusiastic soldier who seemed determined to march straight through the manor's wood paneling. He'd just managed to convince a group of ornaments to stop performing aerial acrobatics when Scarlett burst through the doors. She froze, taking in the scene. Nutcrackers goose-stepping in circles, tinsel snakes performing what looked suspiciously like a synchronized swimming routine in midair, and Grayson calmly conducting the chaos from his floating perch. To his surprise, she didn't immediately flee or start shouting. Instead, her lips twitched as she pulled out her wand. The Nutcrackers need a proper tempo, she called up to him, conjuring what appeared to be a ghostly drum major's baton. You're letting them rush the third measure. Grayson found himself fighting back a smile as she fell into step beside his ladder, using her wand to guide the Nutcrackers into a more orderly formation. I wasn't aware you had experience with militant holiday decorations. Please, she scoffed, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. You should see what happens when the candy canes decide to stage a revolt. This is amateur hour. Working in tandem, they began to bring order to the magical mayhem. Scarlett's natural affinity for organization complemented his curse-induced chaos in unexpected ways. The lights, responding to their combined magic, settled into a gentle twinkle, though they still occasionally flickered to spell out sassy commentary. Your coordinating skills need coordination? Scarlett read, laughing as the lights pulsed in hot pink. Well, someone's feeling judgy today. They take after their curator, Grayson deadpanned, directing a particularly ambitious ornament back to its proper tree. The nutcrackers, finally remembering their military training, formed perfect rows along the stairs. Even the tinsel snakes arranged themselves into elegant swoops, though one couldn't resist performing a final pirouette. Grayson descended the ladder, surveying their work. He caught Scarlett watching him, her expression soft with something that looked dangerously close to genuine admiration. The sight made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with his curse. Naturally, that's when said curse decided to remind him of its presence. The nearest light burst in a shower of golden sparks, raining down like miniature fireworks. "Show off," Scarlett teased, brushing a spark from his shoulder. Her touch was light, casual, but it sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with magical interference. Grayson realized he was smiling, actually smiling, and quickly schooled his features into something more appropriately brooding. But Scarlett had already seen it, her own grin widening. "You know," she said, tapping her wand thoughtfully against her palm, "I think we've discovered your true calling. Chaos Coordinator has a nice ring to it. We could print business cards." Chapter 4: Mistletoe Mischief. The next morning found Scarlett surveying the aftermath of their decorating adventure. Despite their best efforts, and Grayson's curse's worst, the manor's grand entrance had transformed into a winter wonderland, albeit one with slightly askew garlands and the occasional patch of rebellious tinsel that refused to stay put. At least nothing caught fire this time, she mused, adjusting a wreath that kept trying to tilt itself at a jaunty angle. Her mother's normally pristine decorating standards had given way to what Scarlett privately thought of as controlled chaos chic. "I rather like it," came her father's voice from behind her. Arthur Harper stood in his study doorway, pocket watch in hand as always. "The imperfections make it more authentic." "That's a diplomatic way of saying it looks like a magical tornado hit it." "Perhaps?" His eyes twinkled. "Though I notice you haven't tried to fix the star-shaped frost patterns on the windows." Scarlett felt her cheeks warm. The delicate ice crystals had appeared wherever Grayson's curse had manifested, creating unexpectedly beautiful designs that caught the morning light. She'd been pretending not to notice how many of them resembled hearts. "I'm just being practical," she said quickly. "They'll probably melt soon anyway." Arthur's pocket watch chimed knowingly. "And I suppose the way they sparkle whenever you walk past is purely coincidental?" Before Scarlett could protest, Poppy zipped into the hall, trailing what appeared to be Marion's best silver ribbon. "Mine," the dragon announced, executing a victory loop that scattered glitter across the newly cleaned floor. "That's not," Scarlett started, but Milo and Rune were already in pursuit, their wings creating miniature whirlwinds that sent the remaining decorations into a fresh frenzy. "I'll just leave you to it," Arthur chuckled, retreating to his study as the chaos escalated. "Oh, and Scarlett? Your mother wants the mistletoe hung before the afternoon practice run. Something about creating the proper atmosphere." Scarlett groaned, watching the enchanted plant in question bob excitedly in its box. Ever since the decorating incident, it had been even more determined to catch her and Grayson in its magical trap. She could have sworn it was plotting something. "Romantic opportunities," Poppy declared, momentarily abandoning her ribbon theft to perch on the mistletoe box. Her scales shifted to a suggestive rose gold. "Many chances for maintaining our professional arrangement," Scarlett finished firmly. "Nothing more." The mistletoe rustled, in what sounded suspiciously like disagreement. Scarlett balanced precariously on the stepladder, reaching up to position the last sprig of enchanted mistletoe near the grand archway. The delicate plant glowed with a soft, pearly sheen as she guided it with her magic. "This is probably my great-grandmother's most infamous contribution to Harper family traditions," she explained, trying to sound casual despite her hyper-awareness of Grayson moving boxes nearby. She enchanted the first batch of magical mistletoe back in 1922. Said the gala needed more holiday romance. Sounds dangerous, Grayson muttered, his voice closer than she'd expected. Scarlett's concentration wavered as he reached past her, his arm brushing her leg as he grabbed a fallen silver ornament. The mistletoe immediately zipped downward, positioning itself directly above their heads with an almost gleeful bounce. "Oh no," Scarlett breathed as a familiar shimmer of magic expanded around them, creating an invisible dome that made stepping away impossible. She could feel the gentle but insistent pull of the enchantment, like invisible threads drawing them together. "Trapped," Poppy announced with dramatic flair from her perch on the mantel, her scales shifting to an amused gold. "Now you have to kiss." 10. Milo called out from somewhere above. 9. Rune chimed in, both crows clearly enjoying their role as unhelpful commentators. "This is completely unprofessional," Scarlett stammered, trying to maintain her composure even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked up at Grayson, ready to suggest they just get it over with, but the words died in her throat. His stormy gray eyes held an intensity that made her forget how to breathe, and the crystals decorating the nearby garland were pulsing in rhythm with his curse. 8, the crows continued. "We should probably." Scarlett gestured vaguely upward. 7. "Right," Grayson agreed, his voice rougher than usual. 6. They leaned in for a quick peck, but the mistletoe's magic pushed back, clearly unsatisfied. Scarlett stumbled forward, her hands landing against Grayson's chest as his arms instinctively wrapped around her waist to steady her. 5. "The magic wants a proper kiss," Scarlett explained, her voice barely a whisper. "It won't let us go until." Grayson's lips met hers, and the world exploded into sparks. Literal sparks, actually. Tiny points of magical light that danced through the air around them as their magical signatures collided and intertwined. The heartstone in Scarlett's pocket grew warm, almost humming against her hip. 4, 3, oh never mind, Milo trailed off, sounding impressed. Time seemed to slow, stretch, become meaningless. The quick kiss required by tradition deepened into something else entirely, something that made Scarlett's toes curl in her boots. Their combined magic turned the mistletoe into a miniature sun, casting golden light across the room. Grayson's hand slid up her back, and Scarlett forgot every reason why this was a terrible idea. The Christmas tree had other ideas. With a festive pop, every light on its branches burst into rainbow colors, startling them apart. Scarlett stumbled backward, her hands flying to straighten her already neat sweater. "Well." Her voice came out an octave too high. That will definitely be convincing at the gala. Very realistic acting. Good job, team." She winced at her own awkwardness. Grayson's knowing smirk didn't help matters, especially with his hair charmingly mussed where her fingers had apparently been. When had that happened? The mistletoe bobbed happily above his head, seeming very pleased with itself. "Acting," he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it?" Scarlett's cheeks burned, as she busied herself adjusting a perfectly straight row of crystal icicles. These decorations won't arrange themselves. She moved to another section, but the mistletoe followed, hovering hopefully. "Oh, would you look at the time? I just remembered I have some very urgent matchmaking business to take care of. Very urgent. Can't wait." She backed toward the door, pointing vaguely at various decorations. "Just finish up with the things. And the stuff. I'll be elsewhere." Poppy swooped down to land on her shoulder. "Smooth," the dragon commented as Scarlett fled the room. "Very smooth." "Not a word," Scarlett hissed, pressing her hands to her still-burning cheeks. Behind her, she could have sworn she heard Grayson chuckle. The heartstone in her pocket remained warm all the way back to her office. Grayson backed away from the mistletoe incident with as much dignity as he could muster, which wasn't much considering the way his lips still tingled and his curse was making the enchanted holly wreaths whisper romantic sonnets. He needed air. Space. Possibly a complete relocation to another continent. Right then, he muttered, straightening his collar. I should probably. Thunk. He walked face first into what felt like an invisible wall. Grayson reached out, his fingers meeting solid resistance where there should have been empty hallway. Oh, this can't be good. The air around him shimmered like heat waves over summer pavement, then crystallized with an audible crack. Delicate patterns of frost spread outward, forming curved walls that arched overhead until he stood in the center of what appeared to be an enormous snow globe. Glitter-infused snow began falling in lazy spirals, coating his shoulders and hair. Ah, excellent. It works. Marian Harper's voice echoed from somewhere beyond the glass. Her charm bracelet caught the light as she gestured enthusiastically, each charm twinkling with obvious delight. Just a little something to enhance the romantic atmosphere for the gala. What do you think? I think I'd prefer not to be part of the decor, Grayson deadpanned, watching tiny ice sculptures materialize around his feet. Was that Romeo and Juliet on the balcony? A familiar cawing drew his attention upward. Milo and Rune perched on the globe's exterior, their beaks creating musical chimes each time they pecked at the surface. Looking quite festive in there, boss, Milo observed, head tilted. Really brings out your brooding features. Rune tapped thoughtfully at the glass. The perpetual snowfall does add a certain ambiance. Though perhaps less scowling would improve the overall aesthetic. I do not, Grayson started, but his protest was cut short as his curse decided to make its presence known. The ice sculptures around him suddenly animated, launching into dramatic scenes he recognized with growing horror. Mr. Darcy's proposal in the rain. Jack letting go in the icy Atlantic. A couple spinning through the snow from some holiday film Scarlett had made him watch. Oh no, he groaned, watching a tiny ice version of Heathcliff wandering the moors. No, absolutely not. Grayson. Scarlett's voice preceded her return to the hall. Did you, oh my gods. She stopped short, green eyes widening as she took in the magical winter wonderland diorama he'd become trapped in. Her hand flew to her mouth, but not quite fast enough to hide her growing smile. Not one word? He pointed at her through the glass, which only made more snow swirl around his finger. I wouldn't dream of it, she said, voice trembling with suppressed laughter. Let's just get you out of there. She raised her wand, muttering a counterspell. The snow turned a violent shade of pink. Somewhere, a phantom orchestra struck up All I Want for Christmas Is You. Grayson closed his eyes. Please tell me that's not Mariah Carey? I'm afraid so. Scarlett bit her lip, trying another spell. This one added floating hearts that bounced off the glass like soap bubbles. A third attempt summoned cherubs that swooped through the snow, shooting tiny arrows that burst into rose petals. Well, Grayson said, watching a cherub take aim at his head, I suppose this is my life now. I'll have to change my business cards. Grayson Thorn, cursed warlock and professional snow globe occupant. He ducked as the arrow whizzed past. Do you think the cherubs are union? Scarlett's laughter echoed through the hall. Stop it. I'm trying to concentrate. But her next spell went wide, adding a shower of silver bells that chimed in harmony with the music. No, please take your time, he drawled. I'm developing quite a nice collection of romantic clichés in here. Though I think we're still missing, there's the mistletoe. Again. He flicked one of the sprouting clusters with his finger. Persistent little plant, isn't it? Okay. Scarlett wiped tears of mirth from her eyes. Together this time. On 3. They raised their wands in sync, their magic weaving together in a familiar dance that made his chest tight in ways he refused to examine. The spell hit the globe's surface with a resonant chime, and cracks appeared like spiderwebs across the glass. Just before it shattered, Grayson caught sight of their reflection, both grinning despite themselves, transforming into a delicate ice sculpture no bigger than his palm. The globe dissolved in a shower of magical residue, leaving them standing barely a foot apart. Glitter snow clung to everything, resistant to brushing or spells. Scarlett's hair sparkled with it, making her look like she'd been dusted with stars. From the corner of his eye, Grayson watched her subtly pocket the small ice sculpture of their smiling reflection. He kept his expression carefully neutral, though something warm and dangerous unfurled in his chest. 10 out of 10 for the dismount, Milo announced from his new perch on a nearby sconce. Though I think the pink snow was a nice touch. Really brought out your complexion. Quite romantic, Rune agreed sagely. One might even say. Don't, Grayson warned. A magical. That's it. I'm trading you both in for goldfish. Chapter 5, Trouble in the Square. We need traditional Yuletide offerings for the wish, Scarlett announced over breakfast at the Enchanted Cup, consulting a list that sparkled with her mother's elaborate enchanted annotations. Apparently, last year's store-bought gifts were lacking in authentic magical resonance. She mimicked her mother's precise tone with surprising accuracy. And since someone's curse turned our decorating session into a magical circus. I maintain the nutcrackers improved morale, Grayson interjected, taking a sip of his perpetually warm coffee. We need to make up for it with absolutely perfect ceremonial gifts. She spread the list across their table, where the parchment immediately began reorganizing itself by priority and sparkle factor. Mother suggested we try Madame Merriweather's shop in the town square. She specializes in enchanted ornaments that capture magical moments. Grayson eyed the ever-growing list with suspicion. And you're sure this isn't another of your mother's elaborate schemes to force couple-like behavior in public? Of course it is, Scarlett sighed, watching Poppy attempt to steal sugar cubes from neighboring tables. But we still need those offerings. Besides, how chaotic could a simple shopping trip be? Scarlett guided Grayson through Evergreen Hollow's bustling town square, weaving between floating packages that bobbed like colorful buoys in a sea of holiday shoppers. The cobblestones beneath their feet pulsed with festive magic, creating swirling patterns of silver and gold that traced their steps. The market's usually chaotic this time of year, she said, ducking as a particularly enthusiastic gift box zoomed past her head. But Madame Merriweather's ornament stall is worth braving the crowd. If you say so. Grayson's skepticism was evident, but he followed her lead, occasionally batting away determined parcels that seemed magnetically drawn to his head. The ornament stall sparkled like a constellation brought to earth, hundreds of delicate glass spheres suspended in midair. Each one contained a different magical scene: snow-covered villages, dancing sugar-plum fairies, and spinning snowflakes that never seemed to land. These are memory ornaments, Scarlett explained, reaching for a sapphire-blue sphere. They capture magical moments, and... A flash of silver light cut her off. An ornate silver ornament near Grayson had suddenly sprung to life, projecting a scene that made him groan. There he stood, in crystal-clear magical projection, frantically trying to reverse a transformation spell gone wrong. His hair shifted through every color of the rainbow, finally settling into a particularly violent shade of fuchsia. Scarlett couldn't help it, she burst out laughing. Oh my gods, when was this? Last year, he muttered. Took a week to wear off. Her laughter died in her throat as another ornament activated, this one showing her fumbling through her matchmaking certification. Past, Scarlett's charm went hilariously wrong, causing her test subjects to fall madly in love with a potted plant. Well, Grayson smirked, at least the ficus found true love. That's not, Scarlett started, but a streak of gold cut through her vision. Poppy, apparently unable to resist the allure of something shiny, had dive-bombed a particularly gleaming ornament. Poppy, no. Too late. The tiny dragon's tail caught a display stand, sending dozens of enchanted baubles bouncing across the cobblestones like magical rubber balls. Each one activated on impact, projecting snippets of memories into the air. Milo and Rune swooped down from their perch on a nearby lamppost, cawing what sounded suspiciously like laughter. Helpful guys. Grayson called out. Really helpful. The crows' attempt to assist only made things worse. They swooped and dove, knocking more ornaments loose. Soon the town square had transformed into a circus of projected memories. Scarlett's first attempt at brewing love potions, which had turned her entire class temporarily pink. Grayson's disastrous magical theory exam, where he'd accidentally summoned a rain of fish, and countless other moments neither of them had ever wanted to relive. A crowd gathered, pointing and laughing at the impromptu show. Scarlett felt her cheeks burning, until one particular ornament caught her eye. The scene it displayed made her breath catch. Grayson at what appeared to be a holiday party, his curse visibly at work. Decorations wilted around him, glasses shattered, and the looks of disgust on the other guests' faces made her stomach twist. The whispers started immediately. "Isn't that the cursed warlock? I heard he ruins everything he touches. Should someone like that even be allowed at the Yuletide Gala?" Without thinking, Scarlett stepped closer to Grayson, her shoulder brushing his. The gesture was small, but she felt him tense in surprise before relaxing slightly. Poppy, still in pursuit of the shiniest ornament, had made her way to the massive town Christmas tree. "Mine," she chirped, reaching for the star topper. "Don't you dare," Scarlett called out. The star erupted in a fountain of magical sparkles, raining down golden light that made the chaos below even more spectacular. Scarlett grabbed Grayson's hand. "This way." She pulled him toward the giant enchanted nutcracker that stood guard near the town hall steps. They ducked behind it, just as another wave of memories filled the square. "Well," Grayson said between laughs, "I guess this beats brooding at the enchanted cup." Scarlett realized she was still holding his hand and started to pull away, but he gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? Creating a magical disaster? For not running away when that ornament showed my curse." His gray eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable. "Most people do, you know. Run away. I can't remember the last time someone actually stepped closer, instead of backing away." Scarlett's heart did a complicated little dance in her chest. She'd moved instinctively to support him, not even thinking about their arrangement or the act they were supposed to be putting on. It had felt natural, right, and that realization sent a wave of panic through her. "Yes, well," she managed, "what kind of fake girlfriend would I be if I left you to face the ornament apocalypse alone?" Above them, Poppy and the crows were still playing aerial tag with the remaining ornaments, but Scarlett barely noticed. She was too busy trying to ignore how warm Grayson's hand felt in hers, or how the golden sparkles from the star made his eyes look like storm clouds touched by sunrise. "Should we try to stop them?" Grayson nodded toward their familiars. "Probably," Scarlett agreed, making no move to leave their hiding spot. "In a minute." They stayed there, hands linked, watching the magical chaos unfold and sharing occasional glances that felt increasingly less like part of an act. Scarlett told herself the flutter in her stomach was just from the excitement of the afternoon, but deep down, she knew she was in trouble. Because there, hidden behind a giant nutcracker while their familiars wreaked havoc on the town square, she realized she wasn't pretending anymore. And that was definitely not part of the plan. Grayson pressed his back against the enormous nutcracker, painfully aware of Scarlett's shoulder brushing against his. The magical ornaments continued their chaotic dance across the town square, bouncing off lampposts and scattering holiday shoppers like startled pigeons. "Well, this is festive," he muttered, watching an ornament ricochet off a shop window. The nutcracker behind them creaked, its painted wood grinding as it shifted to better shield them. A low, protective hum emanated from its chest, something that sounded suspiciously like Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. "At least someone's on our side," Scarlett whispered, peering around the nutcracker's leg. A silver ornament rolled past their feet, its surface clouding before revealing an image that made Grayson's chest tighten. A younger version of himself stood in Shadowmere Academy's practice hall, green sparks dancing between his fingers as he effortlessly levitated a row of crystal vials. Milo and Rune landed on the nutcracker's shoulder, their usual commentary conspicuously absent. Grayson felt Scarlett's questioning gaze, but kept his eyes on the fading memory. "That was my second year at Shadowmere," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "Before everything." The wreaths adorning nearby shop fronts began to droop, their evergreen needles dulling. The Nutcracker's cheerful tune twisted into a minor key, making Scarlett shiver. "Shadowmere Academy?" she prompted gently. "That's incredibly prestigious. I heard they only accept 12 apprentices per year." Grayson's fingers found the black quartz crystal in his pocket, its familiar edges both comforting and accusatory. 11, actually. They were quite proud of that number, until I came along and ruined their perfect record. The temperature around them plummeted. Frost crept across the cobblestones, and his breath came out in visible puffs. Another ornament spun toward them, this one a deep forest green that made his stomach lurch. Through its glossy surface, twisted trees emerged from shadows, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers. Before the scene could fully materialize, Grayson flicked his wrist. The glass fogged instantly, obscuring whatever secrets it threatened to reveal. A warm weight settled on his shoulder. Poppy, her scales shimmering a concerned blue, extended her tiny clawed hand. In it sat a slightly dusty peppermint candy, clearly pilfered from someone's holiday display. "Mine," she chirped, then reconsidered. "Share." Despite everything, Grayson felt his lips twitch. "Stealing again?" "Finding," Poppy corrected, nudging the candy closer to his face. "Different." "The cursed grove," Scarlett said quietly, bringing his attention back to the matter at hand. "That's where it happened, isn't it?" Grayson unwrapped the candy, if only to have something to do with his hands. "What happened?" "Oh, you mean my spectacular transformation from promising young warlock to walking disaster." He popped the mint in his mouth. "I prefer to think of it as being cursed with charm. Makes for better dinner conversation." Milo cawed softly, the avian equivalent of an eye roll, while Rune shuffled closer to preen Grayson's hair in silent support. The Nutcracker chose that moment to demonstrate Grayson's point. Its joints creaked as it began an enthusiastic tap routine, complete with a jazzy rendition of Jingle Bells humming from its painted mouth. "Time to move," Grayson said, grabbing Scarlett's hand without thinking. They darted from behind their dancing shelter, weaving between scattered ornaments toward the relative safety of a large Christmas tree. As they ran, he caught Scarlett watching him with an expression that made his chest ache. Understanding mixed with something else, something that made him want to tell her everything. About the grove, about the curse, about why he couldn't. "So," he said quickly, ducking behind the tree's lowest branches. "About the gala. I was thinking we should coordinate our story about how we met. Unless you want to tell everyone, it involved property damage and stolen peppermints." The holiday lights strung through the tree's branches began to pulse in an erratic pattern that felt uncomfortably close to his heartbeat. Scarlett opened her mouth to respond, but Poppy beat her to it. "Ooh, pretty." The tiny dragon fluttered up to catch one of the flickering bulbs between her paws. "More chaos." "Mine." "Not yours," Grayson corrected automatically, grateful for the distraction. He focused on the lights, trying to steady their rhythm through sheer force of will. It worked about as well as his attempts at normal conversation, which was to say, not at all. Chapter 6: The First Impressions. Scarlett paused at the dining room's threshold, her hand still resting on Grayson's offered arm. The sight before her confirmed her worst fears about her mother's flair for dramatic decorating. Dozens of enchanted candles floated at varying heights, casting a warm glow that made everything sparkle just a touch too perfectly. The long table practically preened under its elaborate settings, with silverware that periodically rearranged itself into artful patterns. "Mother's gone full fairy tale again," Scarlett muttered under her breath. "I rather like it," Grayson whispered back. "Though I suspect those place cards are enchanted to keep us together." He wasn't wrong. The golden place cards performed an elaborate aerial dance as family members entered, but the two bearing their names practically magnetized to each other's sides. Scarlett caught her mother's satisfied smirk from across the room. Aunt Cordelia's enchanted opera glasses swiveled toward them, like overeager spotlights. The ornate brass contraption had a habit of zooming in on what its owner found most interesting, and apparently Scarlett and Grayson qualified as the evening's entertainment. "Scarlett, darling," Aunt Cordelia trilled. "Do come closer. These old glasses aren't what they used to be." "They work perfectly fine," Scarlett grumbled as they made their way to their seats. Uncle Thaddeus's magical monocle whirred and clicked, expanding like a telescope the moment Grayson's hand brushed Scarlett's lower back while helping her to her chair. The chairs, apparently conspiring with every other enchanted object in the room, scooted closer together of their own accord. Scarlett's knee bumped against Grayson's under the tablecloth, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with magic. She tried to shift away, but the chair merely inched closer. "Wine?" Marian's voice rang out as she orchestrated what could only be described as a ballet of serving dishes. The soup bowls pirouetted through the air in perfect formation, until they passed near Grayson. His curse sparked subtly, and suddenly the bowls broke into a waltz, spinning their contents dangerously close to the edges. Grayson tensed beside her, but before disaster could strike, he murmured something under his breath. The bowls settled into a slightly more sedate dance, though they insisted on twirling once before landing. "So," Cousin Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes glinting like a cat who'd cornered a particularly interesting mouse, "tell us how you two met. I'm dying to know what finally caught our matchmaker's eye." Before Scarlett could stammer out a response, Grayson's warm voice filled the silence. "The enchanted cup, actually. I was enjoying my usual corner table when this whirlwind of determination walked in." His lips quirked up. She ordered her usual, a peppermint mocha whirl with extra candy cane dust and a shot of courage-boosting essence. Scarlett's head snapped toward him. She'd never told him her regular order, but he'd gotten it exactly right, down to the magical enhancement she always added during particularly stressful days. "How did you?" she started, but was interrupted by the peppermill suddenly shooting across the table in hot pursuit of the salt shaker, leaving a trail of spices in its wake. The salt shaker played coy, dodging between wine glasses while the peppermill serenaded it with grinding sounds that somehow formed a love song. "Mother," Scarlett hissed, mortified. "What?" "The seasonings simply want to spice things up," Marian replied with an innocent smile that fooled absolutely no one. Scarlett contemplated whether she could transform herself into one of the floating candles and simply melt away when Poppy, who'd been suspiciously well-behaved until now, launched herself at the nearest fork. The tiny dragon brandished it like a sword, challenging the other silverware to a duel. "On guard," Poppy declared, sending spoons scattering. Great Aunt Prudence looked ready to faint, but Grayson smoothly drew her attention by asking, "Have you read Mortimer's latest treatise on theoretical applications of Renaissance-era transformation spells? His analysis of the 1486 Venetian masquerade incident is fascinating." Prudence's eyes lit up. "Oh, you're familiar with Mortimer's work?" While Grayson engaged in what appeared to be a genuinely enthusiastic discussion about historical magical theory, Scarlett tried to corral Poppy's impromptu fencing tournament. The dragon had recruited several butter knives to her cause, and appeared to be recreating scenes from the Three Musketeers. Just when Scarlett thought the evening couldn't get more ridiculous, the dessert spoons rose into formation and began to sing. Their tinny voices carried the tune of Tale as Old as Time with surprising accuracy, though their vibrations made the crystal water glasses hum along. Scarlett waited for Grayson to make his excuses and run, any sane person would, but he simply raised an eyebrow at the musical cutlery, and to her utter shock, began harmonizing with them in a rich baritone that made her stomach flip. "Speaking of time," Uncle Thaddeus cut in, his magical monocle contracting suspiciously, "how long did you say you've been dating? The timing seems rather convenient." About as convenient as your recent investment in that phoenix feather scheme, Grayson replied smoothly. Though I'd say, I'm getting a much better return on investment. He winked at Scarlett, and she felt her cheeks warm as Arthur failed to hide his amused smile behind his wineglass. The glasses in question seemed to take this as their cue to participate in the evening's matchmaking agenda. They clinked themselves together in a toast, and drops of wine fell onto the pristine tablecloth, forming letters that spelled out true love in elegant script. Did you know, Grayson said, seemingly oblivious to the tablecloth's declaration, that Scarlett color codes her client files based on their magical compatibility? Purple for elemental magic users, blue for those skilled in transformation spells, and gold for the particularly challenging cases. He glanced at her with a soft smile. She says it helps her visualize the connections between different magical traditions when making matches. Scarlett's breath caught. She'd never mentioned her filing system to him. Had he noticed that detail during his visits to her office? The candles floating above them flared brighter, and she watched Marion's charm bracelet shift to a warm, approving gold. Panic seized her chest as she realized something that terrified her more than any magical mishap. She was falling for Grayson Thorn, and their perfectly crafted pretense didn't feel like pretending anymore. Grayson found himself backed into Arthur's study after dinner, though cornered felt too strong a word. The room breathed old magic, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes that whispered ancient secrets. Arthur's pocket watch ticked from its perch on the desk, each sound reverberating with unusual weight in the quiet space. Brandy? Arthur pulled out a crystal decanter filled with liquid that shifted from amber to deep purple. Though I should warn you, it has a habit of matching the drinker's mood. That could be dangerous. Grayson accepted the glass anyway, watching the liquid swirl through shades of stormy gray. The portraits lining the walls, generations of Harpers with their sharp eyes and knowing smirks, began their whispered commentary. Bit scruffy for a Harper suitor. That curse of his, though, quite the magical signature. In my day, we had standards. Arthur shot them a quelling look, and the portraits fell silent, though one elderly witch continued to fan herself disapprovingly. You'll have to excuse the peanut gallery, Arthur said, settling into a worn leather armchair. They're rather invested in family matters. Milo and Rune, trying their best to appear sophisticated, perched on matching bookstands. Grayson had specifically instructed them to behave, which usually guaranteed the opposite. Right on cue, a streak of shimmering scales shot through the study door. Poppy, clutching what appeared to be Marion's favorite enchanted candlestick, executed a victory loop around the room. Mine now, she crowed, tail curling with satisfaction. Milo's dignified facade cracked instantly. Oh, it is on, lizard. The resulting chaos sent books shuffling across shelves like nervous dancers. A collection of delicate magical instruments began to wobble, and Grayson's curse chose that moment to assert itself. The candlestick, caught in the magical crossfire, burst into a passionate rendition of O Sol Mio. Arthur's eyes crinkled with amusement. Interesting manifestation. Your curse has quite the artistic bent. It likes to keep things entertaining, Grayson said dryly, absently touching the black quartz crystal in his pocket. He caught Arthur studying the movement, the pocket watch on his desk pulsing with a sudden golden light. That crystal, Arthur said, steering their conversation toward magical theory. Black quartz has unique properties when it comes to containing or redirecting magical energy, though its effectiveness often depends on the original casting. Before Grayson could respond, Scarlett burst through the door, cheeks flushed. Father, I am so sorry about... She stopped short, taking in the scene. Her father and Grayson settled comfortably with drinks, while their familiars played magical keep-away overhead. The sight of her sent Grayson's curse into overdrive. The study's enchanted globe spun like a possessed top, countries blurring together, until Arthur calmly reached over and stilled it with one finger. He exchanged a look with Scarlett that seemed to carry volumes of unspoken meaning. Poppy, declaring victory in the great candlestick caper, swooped down to perch on Grayson's shoulder. Her tail curled contentedly around his neck as she preened. "Well, that's unexpected," Arthur mused. "Poppy rarely takes to strangers. Took her 3 months to stop setting my shoelaces on fire." "Dad?" Scarlett protested, but Grayson caught her fighting a smile. "Arthur." Marian's voice carried from somewhere downstairs. "The enchanted punch bowl is telling inappropriate jokes again." Arthur rose with a sigh, but paused beside Grayson. "Remember, young man, curses often hide deeper truths about ourselves. The trick is learning to listen to what they're really saying." As they prepared to leave, a leather-bound tome caught Grayson's eye. It sat partially concealed behind Arthur's desk, its spine emblazoned with silver runes that spelled out, "The Cursed Grove, a Historical Account." Scarlett stepped forward, attempting to corral her errant familiar. "Poppy, return that candlestick this instant." Her foot caught on a rolled carpet, sending her stumbling directly into Grayson's arms. Every magical instrument in the study began to chime and trill, creating an impromptu symphony. Grayson found himself staring down into Scarlett's startled green eyes, momentarily forgetting about curses and groves and everything else. Arthur cleared his throat from the doorway, and Grayson realized his carefully maintained mask of indifference had slipped completely. The study's enchanted lamps flickered in a telling rhythm, perfectly matching the thundering of his heart. "I should probably go help your mother," Arthur said, not quite hiding his knowing smile. "Before the punch bowl starts teaching dirty limericks to the carolers." Chapter 7, A Ghost of a Problem. "That book your father was reading," Grayson said the next morning, his coffee at the enchanted cup growing cold for the first time since Scarlett had known him. "The Cursed Grove, a Historical Account. I've never seen that edition before." Scarlett stirred her peppermint mocha whirl thoughtfully, watching the candy cane dust form intricate patterns on the surface. "Dad's always collecting rare texts about magical anomalies. But you're right, that one seemed different." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "And did you notice how his pocket watch reacted to your crystal? Hard to miss, considering every magical instrument in his study started chiming like a deranged orchestra." He touched the black quartz crystal absently. "We need more information." "The ancient library," Scarlett said suddenly, sitting up straighter. "They have the most extensive collection of curse-related texts in 3 provinces. And," she grinned, "I happen to know someone with after-hours access. Let me guess, your family's influence." "Actually, Ms. Grimsworth, the library's spectral curator, has a soft spot for the Harper family. Apparently, my great-great-grandfather helped her catalog the original collection back in 1847. Right before Scarlett made a vague floating gesture. Grayson raised an eyebrow. "The librarian is a ghost?" "She prefers spectral curator of magical knowledge," Scarlett corrected. "She's been guarding those books for nearly 2 centuries. Just don't mention the incident with the enchanted card catalog in 1923. She's still sensitive about that." From her perch on a nearby sugar bowl, Poppy's scales shifted to an alarming shade of fuchsia. "We're going to the library. With all those shiny book covers and crystal reading lamps and—" "No stealing library property," Scarlett interrupted firmly. "I mean it, Poppy. Ms. Grimsworth still hasn't forgiven you for trying to make off with a first edition of Magical Manifestations Through the Ages." "It was sparkly," Poppy muttered defensively. Milo and Rune exchanged looks that promised more chaos than help, but Scarlett was already gathering her things. "We should go now while most of the researchers are at lunch. The restricted section on curses should be relatively quiet." Scarlett's footsteps echoed through the cavernous halls of Evergreen Hollow's ancient library, her wand light casting dancing shadows across towering shelves that stretched up into darkness. Behind her, Grayson's presence felt solid and reassuring, even as the magical lanterns flickered and dimmed around him, another charming quirk of his curse. "The restricted section on curses should be somewhere on the 3rd floor," she whispered, her breath visible in the chilly air. Though I should warn you, the librarian can be a bit particular. More particular than your mother. Grayson's dry tone made her lips twitch. Different kind of particular. Miss Grimsworth's been guarding these books since, Scarlett yelped as a translucent figure materialized through the nearest bookshelf, spectral glasses glinting in the wandlight. Since 1847, to be precise. Miss Grimsworth's ghostly form shimmered with disapproval. And the library closed precisely 37 minutes ago. Books began floating off their shelves, arranging themselves in agitated patterns around the ghost like anxious birds. Scarlett stepped forward, channeling her most diplomatic smile. Miss Grimsworth, we're conducting urgent research about. A streak of gold shot past her ear, as Poppy launched herself toward a massive tome bound in jewels and dragon scales. Mine, the tiny dragon squeaked. Grayson's hand shot out, snagging Poppy mid-dive. Not yours, he corrected, tucking the squirming dragon under his arm. Miss Grimsworth's stern expression softened a fraction. At least someone respects the sanctity of rare books. The ghost adjusted her spectral glasses. Though I require proper credentials before. Of course. Scarlett fumbled in her bag, producing her family's ancient library seal. I'm Scarlett Harper, and this is. A low rumble interrupted her, as nearby books began to tremble and whisper, their pages rustling with increasing urgency. Blue protective wards flickered to life along the shelves as Grayson's curse rippled outward. Miss Grimsworth's form grew more opaque with alarm. Young man, what exactly are you bringing into my library? It's a curse, Scarlett jumped in, positioning herself between the ghost and Grayson while simultaneously grabbing Poppy's tail before she could start nibbling on a nearby scroll. Which is exactly why we need your help. We're trying to research its origins. Two dark shapes swooped down from the upper shelves, Milo and Rune, each carrying promising-looking tomes about magical afflictions. But as they approached Grayson, the books jerked from their grasp, zipping back to their shelves like they'd been yanked by invisible strings. Absolutely not, Ms. Grimsworth declared, her ghostly ledger materializing. The risk to the collection. Arthur Harper sent us. The quill paused mid-scratch. Ms. Grimsworth's expression wavered between duty and nostalgia. Arthur? How is that troublemaker? Still reading those ridiculous adventure novels. Still claims they're light reading, Scarlett confirmed, sensing victory. He speaks very highly of your organizational system. The ghost preened slightly, though she couldn't quite hide her eye roll. Young people and their cursed romances. Very well. She gestured toward a secluded alcove. You may conduct your research there, where any magical disruptions will be contained. The reading nook was cozy, with plush chairs and an enchanted bookstand that kept trying to subtly inch away from Grayson. Scarlett settled next to him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. She noticed immediately how the nearby books stopped their nervous shuffling, as if her presence somehow dampened his curse's effects. Here. She reached for a particularly ancient text, her fingers brushing his as she helped him handle the fragile pages. His shoulders relaxed incrementally, and she pretended not to notice how her heart skipped when he leaned closer to examine a passage she'd found. These might prove useful, Ms. Grimsworth announced, appearing suddenly with a stack of floating books that hovered at a safe distance. Though please control your pet. She cast a disapproving look at Poppy, who was making repeated diving attempts at the magical card catalog, apparently convinced the floating index cards were some sort of game. She's not usually this excitable, Scarlett fibbed, knowing full well that was exactly how Poppy usually behaved. Thank you for your help, Ms. Grimsworth. The ghost sniffed but looked slightly mollified. Just remember, any damage to the books comes out of your family's account. She drifted away, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, just like his father, under her breath. Grayson's fingers traced the delicate spine of forbidden groves and sacred spaces, his black quartz crystal growing warm in his pocket. The ancient tome practically hummed with residual magic, as he eased it from its shelf. Careful with that one, Ms. Grimsworth's spectral form drifted closer, her translucent glasses catching non-existent light. It's been here longer than I have, and I've been dead for 2 centuries. Charming, Grayson muttered, laying the book on a weathered reading desk. Milo and Rune perched on nearby shelves, their beady eyes fixed on the ghost librarian with unusual attention. Scarlett shooed Poppy away from a stack of grimoires. No sniffing the ancient texts, you little pyromaniac. Mine? Poppy's scales shifted to an indignant red as she coiled around Scarlett's shoulders. Definitely not yours. Scarlett moved closer to Grayson, peering over his shoulder as he carefully turned the brittle pages. Her proximity sent a different kind of warmth through him, one that had nothing to do with cursed crystals or ancient magic. The book's contents were a jumbled mess of warnings and observations about magical spaces throughout history. Grayson's attention snagged on a detailed illustration of gnarled trees and glowing runes. There, his words caught as the magical ink began to writhe and shift, the trees in the drawing seeming to twist and grow before his eyes. Ms. Grimsworth materialized closer, her form growing more solid. Fascinating. The book hasn't responded like this in decades. Is that normal? Scarlett leaned in, her auburn hair brushing Grayson's shoulder. The moment her magic mingled with his, the writhing text stabilized, then erupted in brilliant emerald flames. Not ideal, Grayson deadpanned, jerking back from the desk. Milo and Rune launched into action, their wings creating a frenzied windstorm in an attempt to help. Papers scattered, and nearby books rattled in their shelves. I help, Poppy declared, puffing tiny streams of dragon breath at the magical fire. The flames only grew larger, taking on an iridescent quality. Poppy, no. Scarlett lunged for her familiar, but the damage was done. Ms. Grimsworth raised her spectral hands, her form growing brighter as she wove intricate patterns in the air. Tempus Contano, she intoned, her voice echoing with centuries of practiced authority. The emerald flames froze mid-flicker, trapped in a shimmering bubble of suspended time. Grayson leaned forward, squinting through the frozen fire. His heart skipped as he caught fragments of text. Love, sacrifice, and binding magic stood out clearly before the pages disintegrated into fine ash. Damn it. He slammed his fist on the desk, his curse responding by making several nearby lanterns flicker ominously. The black quartz in his pocket grew cold enough to burn. Now. Ms. Grimsworth drifted closer, her stern expression softening. Some books react strongly to those connected to their contents. Perhaps it's not the setback you imagine. It's exactly the setback I imagine, Grayson growled. Every time I get close to understanding this curse. Curses born of love can only be broken by love's truth, Ms. Grimsworth interrupted, her voice taking on an oddly musical quality. The crystal in Grayson's pocket pulsed with darkness, as if recognizing the truth in her words. Scarlett touched his arm gently. We'll figure it out. The moment her hand made contact, every book within 10 feet of them began to glow with a soft, golden light. Ms. Grimsworth's eyebrows rose, and she exchanged knowing looks with both familiars. Even Poppy had the decency to look smug. Perhaps, the ghost librarian mused, you'd be interested in some additional research materials. She glided through several shelves before stopping at a hidden alcove. These texts specifically deal with curse breaking and... She paused diplomatically. Matters of the heart. Matters of the heart. Grayson's voice cracked embarrassingly. Milo cawed what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. For research purposes only, of course. Ms. Grimsworth's smile held centuries of wisdom. As they gathered the suggested books, she drifted close to Grayson and whispered, Sometimes, young warlock, the greatest magic lies not in ancient tomes but in what we're afraid to admit to ourselves. The library's lanterns flickered in response, and Grayson couldn't tell if it was his curse acting up or his own magic betraying his thoughts. He glanced at Scarlett, who was attempting to prevent Poppy from claiming a particularly sparkly book cover as her new treasure. Mine? The tiny dragon asked hopefully. Absolutely not, Scarlett and Ms. Grimsworth said in unison. Grayson found himself fighting a smile despite his frustration. The curse might have destroyed their best lead, but watching Scarlett wrangle her dramatic familiar while surrounded by glowing books and ghost librarians, he couldn't help feeling that maybe, just maybe, Ms. Grimsworth had a point about where to look for answers. Not that he was ready to admit that. Not even to himself. Chapter 8: The Cursed Grove. Sometimes, young warlock, Miss Grimsworth's ghostly voice echoed through the library's empty halls, the answers we seek lie not in ancient tomes, but in returning to where it all began. Scarlett watched the ghost librarian fade away, her words hanging in the air like frost. The scattered remains of the burned book still smoldered with emerald flames, but one fragment remained legible. Curse's origin point holds the key. "We have to go to the grove," Scarlett said, turning to Grayson. His face had gone pale, but he nodded. That's how they found themselves in Arthur's study an hour later, explaining their plan. To Scarlett's surprise, her father didn't object. Instead, he'd pulled out his pocket watch, its surface gleaming with unusual brightness. "The watch has a way of finding what needs to be found," he said, pressing the ancient timepiece into Scarlett's hands. His knowing glance between her and Grayson suggested he understood more than he was saying. Sometimes, to break a curse, you need to return to where it began. Now, Scarlett's fingers trembled around the watch as it pulsed with an insistent rhythm, leading them deeper into the cursed grove. The ancient timepiece had never behaved this way before, its usual steady tick replaced by an almost heartbeat-like thrum that grew stronger with each step forward. "I'm starting to think this wasn't my brightest idea," she muttered, as twisted trees leaned inward, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers overhead. A layer of unnatural frost coated everything, sparkling with an eerie blue light that had nothing to do with the winter season. Poppy huddled against her neck, the dragon's normally vibrant scales shifting from their usual gold to an anxious blue. "You think?" the familiar squeaked, tail curling tighter around Scarlett's shoulder. "This place makes my wings itch." As they ventured further in, ancient runes carved into the trees began to glow with a sickly green light. Scarlett's breath caught in her throat as she watched their exhales crystallize in the air, forming not simple clouds, but intricate magical symbols. She recognized them from the forbidden spell books her father kept locked away in his study, symbols of binding, of sacrifice, of prices paid. "Those are soul-binding runes," she whispered, pointing to a particularly complex pattern their breath had formed. "Dad showed me once, but he said they were too dangerous to." The whispers started then, cutting off her words. They drifted through the branches like autumn leaves, fragments of half-finished incantations and broken promises. "By the power of love unbound. Sacrifice freely given. Curse of the heartbound." The voices grew louder as they approached a clearing, their feet crunching on frost-covered grass. Scarlett's stomach dropped when she saw the scorched ritual circles etched into the ground, their patterns still smoking faintly after what must have been years. Grayson stopped abruptly at the clearing's center, his whole body going rigid. "We shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough. But it was too late. His curse seemed to recognize its birthplace. Dark magic rippled outward from his feet in concentric waves, making the nearby trees groan and shift like they were trying to flee. "Grayson." Scarlett reached for him, but the grove had other plans. Shadowy images shimmered in the air around them, like a magical projection spelled in smoke and frost. A younger Grayson appeared, his face unmarked by the years of isolation his curse would bring. He stood in the same ritual circle where they now stood, arms raised as he attempted a complex summoning spell. The desperation in his expression made Scarlett's heart ache. Poppy dove behind Scarlett's hair with a frightened squeak, as the scene continued to unfold. The spell in the memory went horribly wrong, dark magic wrapping around young Grayson like thorned vines. His screams echoed through the present-day grove, making the trees shudder. The pocket watch spun wildly in Scarlett's palm, its face catching the eerie light. She nearly dropped it when a woman's face appeared in its reflection, beautiful, sad, and somehow familiar, though Scarlett had never seen her before. The woman's features shared something with Grayson's, the same storm-gray eyes, the same proud tilt of the chin. Above them, Milo and Rune perched close together on a frost-covered branch. The usually chatty crows were silent, watching their master's past play out with unusual solemnity. Scarlett had never seen them so still. The whispers grew to a deafening chorus, making Scarlett's teeth ache. Without thinking, she grabbed Grayson's hand. The moment their fingers touched, the dark magic retreated like shadows fleeing from sunlight. The trees shuddered again, but this time it felt less threatening and more like they were adjusting their positions to better show what happened next. New scenes flickered through the clearing, a love spell crafted with the best intentions, a sacrifice made in desperate hope, the terrible price of trying to force fate's hand. Each revelation hit Scarlett like a physical blow as she pieced together the truth. The woman in the watch, the familiar features, the curse that specifically targeted matters of the heart. "Your mother," Scarlett breathed, squeezing Grayson's hand tighter. "She tried to help you find love, didn't she?" A tear rolled down Grayson's cheek, instantly crystallizing into magical frost before it could hit the ground. Poppy emerged from hiding just long enough to nuzzle his other cheek, her scales shifting to a gentle lavender color of comfort. "She thought she could guarantee my happiness," Grayson said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you can't force love." The grove's magic twisted her intention into this. He gestured at himself with his free hand, dark magic crackling at his fingertips. "Every time I start to care for someone, the curse remembers its purpose. It tries to force a connection, but magic and love don't work that way. It always backfires." The whispers faded to a gentle murmur, like the grove itself was acknowledging the pain of his confession. Scarlett watched another tear turn to frost on his cheek, and for once in her life, she had no quick comment or clever solution to offer. She just held his hand tighter, letting their shared magic push back against the darkness that had haunted him for so long. Grayson stood frozen in the clearing, his past crashing over him like an icy wave. The twisted trees of the cursed grove seemed to fade away as memories flooded his mind, his younger self kneeling in this very spot, chalk dust coating his trembling hands as he drew intricate summoning circles in the dirt. "I was so desperate," he whispered, barely aware of Scarlett's presence beside him. "Everyone else had someone. I thought if I could just create the perfect match." The black quartz crystal in his pocket began to vibrate, its energy building until it hummed against his chest. The grove's ancient magic recognized him, remembered him, and the air grew thick with power that made his skin prickle. "I spent months researching forgotten love spells, convinced I could modify them." Dark tendrils of cursed energy began snaking up nearby tree trunks, responding to the turmoil in his voice. "I thought I could summon my ideal partner into existence, someone who would understand me completely, accept me unconditionally." Scarlett gasped as understanding dawned, and the sound seemed to trigger something in the grove. Branches creaked and twisted overhead, reaching down with gnarled fingers while magical thorns erupted from the earth around their feet. "Look out!" Milo's harsh caw cut through the air as he and Rune dove through the chaos, their wings batting away falling debris. Poppy zipped between shadow vines that threatened to ensnare them, her tiny flames creating protective barriers. Through the mayhem, Grayson watched in amazement as Scarlett planted her feet and raised her hands. Golden shields of protective magic bloomed around them like flower petals. "This grove can't have you," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Whatever happened here, it's in the past." The force of her determination hit him like a physical blow, and for a moment he felt his curse falter. The constant weight of bad luck lifted ever so slightly from his shoulders. Arthur's pocket watch, still clutched in Scarlett's hand, began to emit a high-pitched tone that perfectly matched the vibration of his crystal. The resonance carved a visible path through the magical storm, a tunnel of calm in the chaos. "There's our way out," Grayson called, grabbing Scarlett's arm. They ran forward as the grove tried to close in around them. A massive branch cracked overhead, and Grayson acted on instinct, pulling Scarlett against his chest and turning to shield her. Their magical auras collided and merged, his stormy gray energy intertwining with her golden light. The grove's attack seemed to bounce off the combined shield, dissipating into harmless sparkles. "You risked everything trying to find love," Scarlett said softly, looking up at him without a trace of judgment. Anyone who's ever felt alone could understand that. Grayson tried to respond, but words failed him. His curse stirred, but instead of its usual destructive manifestation, gentle snowflakes began drifting down around them. Each flake caught the light like tiny prisms, creating a dome of scattered rainbow reflections. The grove wasn't finished with them yet. Shadow vines shot up from the ground, trying to wrap around their ankles and pull them apart. But Scarlett's optimistic magic continued to blend with his power, creating a brilliant shield that cut through the darkness. As they fought their way toward the edge of the grove, Scarlett's hand found his. Their fingers interlaced perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Grayson's heart hammered against his ribs as he recognized the feeling, exactly what his failed spell had promised all those years ago. The reality of it terrified him more than any curse. They burst out of the grove together, stumbling to a stop in the normal forest beyond its boundaries. They were physically unharmed, but Grayson felt stripped bare. His darkest secret lay exposed, and the way Scarlett's hand still fit so naturally in his made him want to run and never stop. Because a magically manufactured perfect match was one thing, safe, controlled, predictable. But the real woman standing beside him, who had just fought through a cursed grove to help him face his past. Who looked at his greatest shame and offered understanding instead of disgust. She was utterly terrifying in her authenticity. The gentle snow continued to fall around them, his curse transformed by whatever had just happened between them. Grayson stared at their joined hands, unable to look at Scarlett's face, afraid of what he might see there, or worse, what she might see in his. Chapter 9: The Evergreen Wish. Scarlett's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Grayson's boutonniere, a delicate arrangement of enchanted holly and winter roses. Behind them, the evergreen wish pulsed with an irregular rhythm that matched the flutter in her stomach. "Stop fidgeting," she muttered more to herself than to him. "It's just a practice run," says the witch who's rearranged my flowers 3 times. Grayson's voice carried that familiar dry humor, but his gray eyes held something warmer. The wish flickered in response, casting emerald shadows across his face. Well, if someone's curse hadn't turned the first 2 boutonnieres into confetti. Those were clearly defective. They were perfectly enchanted until you touched them. A small explosion of glitter interrupted their banter as Poppy swooped down, trailing sparkles from her tail. "More sparkle," she announced, circling Grayson's formal robes with determination. "Needs more shine." Poppy, no, but it was too late. The tiny dragon's improvements set off a chain reaction of glitter bombs that had the ancestral portraits along the grand entrance sneezing in synchronized disapproval. "Much better," Poppy declared, perching on a nearby sconce with a self-satisfied smirk. Marian appeared from behind a towering Christmas tree, her charm bracelet cycling through shades of yellow and purple as she pretended to straighten an already immaculate garland. "Everything all right, dears? The wish seems a bit excitable today." Scarlett fought the urge to roll her eyes. Her mother had been casually circling them for the past 20 minutes, rearranging decorations that didn't need arranging, and making helpful suggestions that sounded suspiciously like wedding planning. "We're fine, Mother. Just dealing with some magical feedback." Scarlett's hand brushed against Grayson's as she made a final adjustment to his boutonniere, and the evergreen wish erupted in a brilliant flash of green light. Every magical lamp, candle, and twinkling decoration in the grand entrance suddenly pulsed in perfect rhythm, a rhythm that matched the racing of Scarlett's heart. "Fascinating," Marian murmured, her bracelet settling on a knowing shade of blue. "I don't think I've ever seen it respond quite like that before." "Probably just the curse," Scarlett said quickly, stepping back from Grayson. But the wish followed their movement, its traditionally steady glow transforming into waves of ethereal green light that danced like an enchanted aurora. "Yes, clearly the curse is to blame for this unprecedented display of magical harmony," her mother agreed with excessive innocence. "Shall we begin the practice run?" Milo and Rune swooped down from their perch, taking their positions as ceremonial witnesses. At least they tried to. The wish's spectacular light show kept drawing their attention, causing them to bump into each other mid-flight. "Focus, you two," Grayson grumbled, but even his familiar scowl couldn't quite hide his wonderment at the display. They took their places before the wish, and Scarlett began reciting the traditional presentation words. "We stand before the Evergreen Wish, offering our—" She broke off as Grayson swayed slightly, the artifact's power surging around them. Without thinking, she grabbed his arm to steady him. The moment they touched, the chaos settled. The wish's light softened to a gentle pulse, and Grayson's tension eased under her fingers. Scarlett caught her mother's raised eyebrow and quickly dropped her hand, but the damage was done. "Well," Marion said, consulting one of her magical measuring tools which was spinning like a deranged compass, "this is certainly unexpected. The curse appears to be amplifying the wish's power, rather than disrupting it." Before Scarlett could respond, the wish projected a shower of glowing symbols into the air around them. Ancient runes spiraled and danced, forming patterns that made Scarlett's chest tight with recognition. "Oh my," Marion breathed, adjusting Scarlett's holly pin with deliberate care. "Those are rather specific runes about true love and fated pairs, aren't they?" "Mother. I'm just making an observation, dear. Though I must say, in all my years of organizing the gala, I've never seen the wish behave quite like this." Determined to maintain some professional distance, Scarlett took a step away from Grayson during their final practice run. The wish's brilliant display immediately dimmed, the runes fading to barely visible whispers of light. She held out for about 30 seconds before sighing and moving closer to him again. The artifact burst back to life, its glow synchronized with their every shared glance. "Traitor," she muttered at the wish. "I heard that," Grayson whispered, his lips twitching. From the corner of her eye, Scarlett caught her mother settling into a plush armchair, her personal grimoire open on her lap. The knowing smile on Marion's face as she wrote made Scarlett want to hide behind the Christmas tree. "This is just magical interference," she insisted to no one in particular. "Perfectly normal reaction between a curse and an ancient artifact." The wish responded by projecting a heart-shaped constellation of runes above their heads. Poppy, still covered in glitter, landed on Scarlett's shoulder with a snort. "Sure it is. And I'm a garden gnome." Grayson stood before the assembled magical families of Evergreen Hollow, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The Evergreen Wish floated serenely at the center of the ballroom, its brilliant emerald glow casting dancing shadows across the faces of witches and warlocks dressed in their holiday finest. He could feel his curse stirring beneath his skin, dark tendrils of chaotic magic reaching toward the ancient artifact. "Deep breaths, boss," Milo muttered from his perch on Grayson's left shoulder. "You look like you're about to throw up on your fancy shoes." "Helpful as always," Grayson murmured back, though he appreciated the familiar's attempt at levity. Rune, ever the quieter of the pair, settled on his right shoulder with a reassuring weight. Scarlett's hand brushed against his, and the simple contact sent a spark of warmth through his chest. The Evergreen Wish responded immediately, its steady glow flickering like a candle in a draught. From the front row, Aunt Cordelia's jeweled opera glasses clattered against her silk robes as she jerked backward in shock. "Goodness gracious," she exclaimed, loud enough for half the room to hear. "The wish, it's destabilizing." The whisper started then, a rustle of concerned voices that reminded Grayson of dead leaves skittering across pavement. He watched, throat tight, as the artifact's light began to dim, its usual brilliance fading to a sickly pale green that barely illuminated the golden frame containing it. "Just as I suspected," came Uncle Thaddeus's booming voice from somewhere in the crowd. "Questionable magical lineage, if you ask me. The Thorns always did dabble in darker arts." The black quartz crystal in Grayson's pocket pulsed with his suppressed emotion, and he felt his curse surge in response. The wish's light dimmed further, now barely a glimmer in the darkness. "That's quite enough," Scarlett's voice rang out clear and strong. She stepped forward, her green eyes blazing with an intensity that made his breath catch. For centuries, we've let this artifact dictate what makes a proper magical match. We've allowed it to judge our worth, based on some arbitrary standard of perfection. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but Scarlett wasn't finished. But magic isn't about perfection. It's about balance, about finding harmony in chaos. And sometimes, she glanced at Grayson, her lips curving into a smile that made his heart stutter, the most powerful magic comes from embracing our supposed flaws. To Grayson's astonishment, the wish began to respond. Instead of fighting against his curse's dark energy, it seemed to welcome it, sending out waves of warm light that pulsed in sync with his own magic. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced before, not a battle between light and dark, but a dance. When I first asked Grayson to be my date, Scarlett continued, I thought I was just solving a problem. But our journey together has taught me more about genuine connection than any matchmaking spell ever could. As she spoke, the artifact's glow shifted, swirling with threads of shadow that twisted through its emerald light like ink in water. From the crowd, Arthur's pocket watch chimed 3 times, its sound rich with approval. Beside him, Marian's charm bracelet glowed a deep, satisfied purple. Scarlett turned to face Grayson fully, taking both his hands in hers. The touch sent electricity racing up his arms. Love isn't about being perfectly compatible or following traditional magic. It's about choosing someone despite their cursed decorating skills. This earned a laugh from the crowd, and because of their strength in facing every magical mishap with dry wit and determination. The wish erupted in a spectacular display of light, matching the aurora they'd witnessed in the cursed grove. Grayson felt his curse respond, but for once the chaos within him didn't feel like a burden. It transformed, adapting and flowing into something new as Scarlett's magic reached for his, their energies intertwining like 2 streams merging into a river. The artifact's light grew impossibly bright, projecting images into the air above the assembled crowd. Grayson watched transfixed as moments from the past weeks played out like a magical film reel. The 2 of them tangled in enchanted garlands, their first kiss under the mistletoe, working together to escape the snow globe, researching in the library, braving the cursed grove hand in hand. Each memory showed both the chaos his curse had caused, and the way they'd faced it together, finding humor and connection in the midst of magical mayhem. The crowd's fearful murmurs transformed into gasps of wonder as the display continued, the wish celebrating their unique bond in a way no one had ever seen before. Milo and Rune took flight, circling above them in a proud display. Now that's what I call a power couple, Milo crowed, while Rune performed an elegant aerial bow. Grayson looked at Scarlett, taking in her determined expression and the way her hair sparked with magical energy. The words he'd been holding back rose to his lips, no longer part of any act or arrangement. He squeezed her hands, and for the first time since his curse began, he felt truly seen and accepted for exactly who he was. His curse, rather than disrupting the moment, seemed to enhance it, adding depths of shadow that made the wish's light even more spectacular. The artifact pulsed with their combined energy, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the ballroom that drew appreciative sighs from even their harshest critics. Chapter 10: When Magic Sparks. Scarlett paced the familiar floorboards of her childhood bedroom, each step making the enchanted carpet beneath her feet shimmer with tiny constellations. Her mother sat on the window seat with perfect posture, the cushions adjusting themselves to support her back just so. The charm bracelet on Marian's wrist flickered with knowing amber light that made Scarlett's stomach twist. "Darling, do sit down. You're making the stars dizzy." Marian gestured to the scattered throw pillows near her feet. "I prefer standing, Mother." Scarlett crossed her arms, trying to ignore Poppy, who had draped herself across a mountain of holiday cushions like a tiny judgmental queen. The miniature dragon's scales had shifted to an insufferable rose gold that practically screamed, "I knew it." "Very well." Marian reached into her embroidered handbag and pulled out a stack of magical photographs. "Perhaps you'd like to explain these?" Scarlett's heart dropped as her mother spread the images across the window seat. There she was with Grayson, caught in dozens of unguarded moments, his hand lingering at the small of her back as they navigated through floating garlands, her fingers straightening his collar while fairy lights danced around them, both of them laughing as they untangled enchanted ribbons. We were just staying in character, Scarlett managed, but the heartstone in her pocket chose that moment to warm against her hip like a betraying little furnace. Poppy let out a dramatic snort and launched into an interpretive reenactment of the mistletoe incident. The dragon fluttered dramatically through the air, clasping her claws to her chest and swooning with exaggerated passion. Tiny puffs of heart-shaped smoke trailed behind her as she spun. Really? Marian's perfectly shaped eyebrows climbed higher. And I suppose this swooning is purely theatrical as well? Poppy is prone to exaggeration, Scarlett muttered, shooting a glare at her familiar. It was just a magical compulsion from the mistletoe. Nothing more. The ornate mirror above her dresser suddenly fogged over, and Scarlett's heart sank as it began playing a greatest hits compilation of her own stolen glances. There she was, watching Grayson console a crying first-year witch whose charm had backfired. Another image showed her admiring his profile as he studied curse texts in the library, and yet another captured her fond smile as he shared his coffee with a shivering homeless wizard in the town square. "Oh, look at that one," Marian commented as the mirror showed Scarlett beaming at Grayson while he entertained her young cousins with shadow puppets enhanced by his magic. "Purely professional, I'm sure." "The mirror's enchantments must be malfunctioning," Scarlett insisted, though her cheeks burned. "Besides, the evergreen wish barely responded to us." "Barely?" Marian's charm bracelet chimed in protest, its crystals tinkling like laughing bells. "Darling, it practically sang when you two approached. I haven't seen it react that strongly since your father and I were young." "That's..." Scarlett faltered. "It's temporary. This whole arrangement has an expiration date." Poppy's dramatic eye roll sent her tumbling off her cushion mountain. Holiday decorations scattered across the floor as the dragon crashed, sending enchanted ornaments rolling under the bed and tinsel floating through the air like magical confetti. As if conspiring against her denial, the antique music box on her nightstand suddenly sprang to life. The haunting melody that had played in the library filled the room, the same song that had been playing when Grayson had finally opened up about his past, his gray eyes soft with trust as he'd shared his fears about the curse. "And what about this?" Marian produced the miniature ice sculpture from the snow globe incident. The delicate figure began to glow with warm light the moment Scarlett's gaze fell upon it. "Enchanted ice doesn't typically respond to excellent acting, my dear." Scarlett sank onto her bed, her carefully constructed protests crumbling like gingerbread walls. She remembered standing before the crowd at the gala, defending Grayson without a second thought. Her words hadn't been calculated or planned, they'd burst from somewhere deep in her chest, powered by something that felt suspiciously like. "Oh stars," she whispered, pressing her hands to her warm cheeks. Poppy seized the moment to slither up and curl around Scarlett's shoulders like a smug, scaly scarf. The dragon's scales now pulsed with knowing rainbow hues, and she nuzzled Scarlett's ear in what might have been comfort if it didn't feel so much like draconic gloating. Marian's expression softened as she watched her daughter's realization dawn. "Sometimes, my dear," she said, her charm bracelet glowing with maternal warmth, "the best matches are the ones we don't plan for. Even matchmakers need to let magic surprise them, occasionally." "But his curse is a problem to be solved, not a wall to hide behind." Marian rose gracefully, her robes shimmering with encouraging sparkles. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Scarlett stroked Poppy's scales, her mind racing through every moment she'd dismissed as part of their charade. The warmth in Grayson's eyes when she'd defended him, the way his magic seemed to calm around her, how natural it felt to reach for his hand when things went wrong. The heartstone in her pocket practically hummed against her hip, no longer content to let her ignore its message. Grayson paced the moonlit conservatory, his footsteps echoing off marble floors and glass walls. The enchanted plants, usually eager to greet visitors, bent away from him like party guests avoiding an awkward conversation. Frost crackled across the windows in his wake, creating delicate patterns that sparkled in the silvery light. "Face it, boss," Milo croaked from his perch on the ornate fountain. "You're in deep." The crow preened his feathers, looking far too smug for Grayson's liking. Rune, ever the voice of reason, settled on the opposite side. "Perhaps we should examine the evidence objectively." His quieter tone carried a hint of amusement. "The curse has shown remarkable adaptations since Miss Harper entered the picture." "Adaptations?" Grayson scoffed, though his eyes traced the frost patterns forming on the nearest window. "Were those hearts?" "Oh, allow me to demonstrate." Milo launched into a theatrical impression, wings spread wide. "I must protect her from my curse, for I am darkness incarnate." He clutched his chest with one wing. "Better to suffer alone than risk her happiness." The nearby rose bushes actually snickered, their leaves rustling with barely contained mirth. Grayson shot them a withering look. "You forgot the brooding hair toss," Rune added helpfully. "He always does the hair toss." Grayson's hand, halfway to his hair, dropped quickly to his pocket, where the black quartz crystal pulsed with warmth. The stone had been acting strange lately, responding too well to Scarlett. He pulled it out, watching conflict swirl in its depths as he remembered her fierce defense of him at the gala. The frost patterns spread faster, forming intricate swirls that definitely resembled hearts now. No point denying it. A photograph slipped from his pocket, floating to the ground like an autumn leaf. Scarlett's face beamed up at him, caught mid-laugh during their chaotic shopping trip. The moment it touched the floor, nearby winter roses burst into bloom, their petals a deep midnight blue that matched the twilight sky above the glass ceiling. "Shall we review the evidence?" Milo hopped closer, adopting a scholarly tone. "Exhibit A. I can't attend the holiday market, my curse might ruin it." "Reality. You won her a enchanted snow globe that only plays her favorite carols." "That was an accident," Grayson muttered. "Exhibit B," Milo continued, undeterred. "The mistletoe is too dangerous." "Reality. It created floating butterflies made of starlight." "The curse is unpredictable." "If I may," Rune interrupted softly, "your concern for Miss Harper's safety is admirable, but perhaps we should consider that your curse responds differently to her presence for a reason." The conservatory's enchanted sundial shifted, its shadow spinning backwards. Instead of hours it displayed moments, Scarlett tangled in holiday garlands, laughing against his chest. Their hands brushing as they researched in the library. Her face illuminated by the evergreen wishes glow. "Order in the court," Milo suddenly declared, hopping to a higher perch. The case of Grayson Thorn versus his own stubborn heart is now in session. He puffed up his feathers importantly. "As prosecutor, I present this lovesick fool who's using a curse as an excuse to avoid emotional vulnerability." "Objection," Rune countered smoothly. "My client's concerns about magical backlash are well documented." "Sustained," Milo allowed. "However, I present evidence of the defendant staring at Miss Harper for exactly 8 minutes during dinner, without blinking." "I was not." The prosecution calls attention to the defendant's inability to complete a single sentence when Miss Harper wore that green dress to the pre-gala dinner. Grayson grabbed a piece of parchment from a nearby writing desk. He'd end this nonsense now. A quick note explaining why they needed to stop this charade, before someone got hurt. But as his quill touched paper, the ink swirled of its own accord, forming scarlet in elaborate calligraphy. He crumpled the parchment with a growl. The conservatory fell silent, save for the gentle splash of the fountain. Grayson pressed his forehead against the cool glass, watching frost spread from his touch. But instead of the usual chaotic patterns, it formed a perfect rendering of Scarlett's smile, the real one, not her professional matchmaker grin. The one that appeared when she thought no one was looking. "Sweet Merlin's beard," he whispered, realization hitting him like a runaway broomstick. "I'm not protecting her at all, am I?" His familiars exchanged knowing looks. "He's got it bad, hasn't he?" Milo stage whispered to Rune. The frost pattern caught the moonlight, making Scarlett's smile shimmer like starlight on snow. His curse wasn't creating chaos anymore, it was creating beauty. And that terrified him more than any magical mishap ever had. Chapter 11, The Truth Revealed. Scarlett's fingers trembled as she approached the evergreen wish, its crystalline surface catching and multiplying the glow of hundreds of fairy lights strung throughout the ballroom. Grayson walked beside her, his usual confident stride replaced by something more hesitant. The gathered crowd of Evergreen Hollow's magical elite pressed closer, their whispers creating a soft symphony of anticipation. "Ready for our grand performance?" she murmured, trying to inject some levity into the moment. But her voice caught when she noticed how the wish's light played across Grayson's features, softening the worried lines around his eyes. Above them, Poppy swooped into position, her scales shifting from nervous blue to determined gold. She chirped what sounded suspiciously like orders to Milo and Rune, who responded with surprisingly coordinated movements. The three familiars formed a perfect circle overhead, their synchronized flight creating faint trails of magical energy. "Show-offs," Scarlett whispered, but her attempted joke died as the wish began to pulse. The rhythm matched her heartbeat exactly, or was it Grayson's? She couldn't tell anymore. The magic rippled outward in waves, and Scarlett felt the carefully arranged pins in her hair start to loosen. Auburn strands floated around her face as if she were suspended in water, matching the dreamlike quality of the moment. "Scarlett." Grayson's voice was rough with emotion as his hand found hers. The instant their fingers intertwined, the wish's surface erupted with images. There they were in the library, heads bent together over ancient texts, while a ghostly librarian huffed in the background. The scene shifted to their harrowing experience in the cursed grove, but instead of focusing on the danger, it highlighted how they'd moved in perfect sync, protecting each other without thought. Even their chaotic adventure in the town square took on new meaning, as the wish revealed subtle glances and soft smiles they'd both missed at the time. "Oh," Scarlett breathed, feeling something dark and electric brush against her magic. Grayson's curse, she realized, but it wasn't fighting her as she'd expected. Instead, the tendrils of shadow magic wove through her natural light like ink through water, creating patterns both beautiful and strange. The wish pulsed brighter, and suddenly the air above them filled with streams of colored light. Scarlett watched transfixed as ribbons of magic, hers a warm golden glow, Grayson's a deep midnight blue, danced and twisted together. Each point where they merged sparked with a new color entirely, something that reminded her of sunrise breaking through storm clouds. From somewhere in the crowd, she heard the musical chime of her mother's charm bracelet, followed by the deeper tone of her father's pocket watch. The sounds harmonized perfectly with the wish's display as it showed more memories, but these were different. These were moments between scenes. Grayson adjusting her scarf when she was cold, Scarlett bringing him coffee just the way he liked it, small touches and shared laughs that had seemed insignificant at the time. "Look," Grayson whispered, drawing her attention to their reflection in the wish's surface. But it wasn't quite them, or rather, it wasn't quite them yet. The reflection showed something more, something possible, both of them surrounded by clear, unfettered magic, no trace of darkness or constraint. They looked happy. They looked free. They looked in love. Their eyes met in the reflection, and the wish's glow intensified to near blinding levels. Every magical item in the ballroom responded. Floating candles flared brighter, enchanted garlands rustled and shimmered, and even the mischievous mistletoe seemed to dance with renewed energy. The curses unraveling hit her in waves of emotion that weren't her own. Scarlett gasped as Grayson's feelings washed over her. The bone-deep fear of hurting those he cared about, the fragile hope that had grown with each day spent in her company, and underneath it all a love so strong it took her breath away. "I didn't mean to," he started to say, looking panicked at the emotional display. Before he could retreat behind his walls, Poppy let out an explosive sneeze, showering the closest guests with magical glitter. The crowd turned instinctively toward the distraction, giving them a moment of relative privacy in the midst of all the magic. Scarlett squeezed Grayson's hand tighter. "Don't you dare apologize." The wish gave one final pulse, projecting their mistletoe kiss above the ballroom. But this time, Scarlett saw what she'd been too flustered to notice before: the way their magic had reached for each other instantly, natural as breathing. There had never been any pretense, not really. Their magic, their hearts, had known the truth all along. "I don't want to pretend anymore," she whispered, watching the memory play out above them. "I don't think I ever really was." Grayson felt it first as a tremor deep in his bones, the curse's dark energy crystallizing around him like black ice as the evergreen wish pulsed with an almost blinding brilliance. Each wave of light sent hairline cracks through the magical bonds that had haunted him for so long. His fingers tightened around Scarlett's, anchoring himself as the power built. "Something's happening," he managed through gritted teeth. Above them, Milo and Rune swooped in tight circles, their wings trailing silver light that formed protective runes in the air. The ancient symbols sparked and fizzed, fighting against the darkness that had become as much a part of him as his own shadow. The black quartz crystal he'd carried for years began to vibrate in his pocket, growing hot enough to burn. He pulled it out with his free hand, and it shuddered violently before exploding into obsidian dust. Years of trapped emotions, hope, fear, longing, love, burst free like a dam breaking. The wish caught each feeling, transforming them into showers of magical sparks that rained down around them. "Don't let go," Scarlett whispered, her grip fierce and steady. As if he could. As if he ever wanted to again. The curse fought back, coiling tighter, but it was too late. Like ice in spring, it cracked and splintered, then exploded outward in a cascade of shadow and light. The darkness dissolved into thousands of golden butterflies that spiraled up toward the manor's enchanted ceiling, their wings catching the candlelight. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Grayson's magic stabilized for the first time in years. The wild, unpredictable energy that had plagued him settled into smooth channels, harmonizing perfectly with Scarlett's own power. The wish responded with pure, crystalline chimes that echoed through the ballroom like celestial bells. Arthur stepped forward from the crowd, his ever-present pocket watch held out before him. The hands spun wildly before stopping with a decisive click. 11:11, he announced, his usual stoic expression softened by a smile. The exact moment the curse broke. Beside him, Marion dabbed at her eyes with an enchanted handkerchief that changed colors to match her tears of joy. Grayson turned to Scarlett, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "I stopped believing in love years ago," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Convinced myself it wasn't worth the risk. But you," he had to pause as his voice cracked. Above them, sprigs of mistletoe suddenly burst into bloom, weeks ahead of season. "You made me want to try again. To hope again. To love again." The manor itself seemed to respond to their connection, its ancient magic creating a soft aurora of light that danced around them. Poppy zoomed overhead, leading Milo and Rune in elaborate aerial loops that left trails of sparkling magic in their wake. Looking into Scarlett's bright green eyes, Grayson felt his newly freed magic surge. It wrapped around them in a perfect sphere of privacy, though through the translucent barrier he could see their silhouettes clearly displayed by the wish's persistent glow. He pulled her close, one hand cupping her cheek. "No more pretending," he murmured. Their kiss ignited a chain reaction through the ballroom. Every enchanted object activated at once. Hundreds of floating candles spun like tiny stars, the magical orchestra burst into a sweeping waltz, and the portraits of past Harper family members actually stood up in their frames to applaud. The evergreen wish pulsed one final time, and a shower of crystal formations sprouted from its base, capturing their moment in eternal, magical amber. Future generations would see their story preserved, the curse breaker and the matchmaker who found their own perfect match. Grayson broke the kiss with a laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere that had been locked away for far too long. He lifted Scarlett in a joyous spin, his magic finally free to express everything in his heart. Their familiars danced around them, showering them with magical sparkles that hung in the air like stars. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, but Grayson barely heard them. His world had narrowed to Scarlett's brilliant smile, the weight of her in his arms, and the wonderful lightness in his chest where the curse had once lived. His magic, no longer dark and turbulent, swirled around them in patterns of silver and gold. "Was this in your matchmaking notebook?" he teased, still holding her close. Curse breaking through the power of love. Chapter 12, Spellbound for the Holidays. Poppy settled onto Scarlett's shoulder, with the regal bearing of a dragon who'd just orchestrated the most spectacular matchmaking success in Evergreen Hollow's history. Her scales shimmered between smug gold and satisfied rose as she watched her human and the formerly cursed warlock share yet another soppy look. Honestly, they were almost too easy to manipulate, or help. A flicker of movement caught her attention, and her tail twitched irritably. That sneaky crow Milo was eyeing the loose panel behind the enchanted tapestry where she'd stashed her most precious treasures. The collection included 3 silver spoons, a crystal doorknob that caught the light just so, and most importantly, Arthur's temporarily borrowed pocket watch that had led them to the grove. "Mine," she thought firmly, sending Milo her most imperious glare. The crow pretended sudden fascination with a floating candle. Poppy preened, mentally tallying her contributions to breaking Grayson's curse. The pocket watch had been pure genius, really. And if anyone asked, she'd absolutely meant for those library books to fall exactly that way, creating the perfect excuse for Scarlett to stumble into Grayson's arms. The ghostly librarian's shriek had been an unexpected bonus. A glittering champagne flute floated past, and Poppy's eyes tracked it hungrily. The gala was a treasure trove of potential acquisitions: crystal glasses, golden ribbons, and was that a diamond-encrusted bell on that enchanted wreath? She made a mental note to investigate later. Movement from the opposite direction drew her attention. Rune was making an obvious show of admiring the ice sculptures, but Poppy wasn't fooled. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Milo inching closer to her hiding spot. Amateurs. The evergreen wish pulsed with magic, its surface suddenly reflecting scenes from the past weeks. Poppy watched with growing satisfaction as it displayed her finest moments, the strategic positioning of that enchanted mistletoe. It had taken 3 tries to get the timing just right. The accidental scroll avalanche that revealed the first clue about Grayson's curse, and even that brilliant moment when she'd created a distraction by setting the library curtains aflutter. Lost in her self-congratulatory review, Poppy didn't notice the enchanted garland until it was too late. The festive rope of evergreen and holly sprang to life, wrapping around her tail with determined cheerfulness. She let out an indignant squeak, releasing a puff of glittery smoke that made Scarlett sneeze. "Poppy!" Scarlett called as her dragon familiar launched into the air, trailing sparkles and tinsel. Poppy zipped between floating candles, her scales flashing rainbow colors of annoyance and excitement. The garland refused to let go, creating a spectacular trail of magical light behind her. Below, party guests gasped and pointed, clearly appreciating her impromptu aerial display. Milo and Rune abandoned their attempted heist, taking wing to join the chase. Show-offs, Poppy thought as they weaved through the enchanted decorations. Their pursuit only added to the chaos as wreaths, spun like pinwheels, and ribbons danced in their wake. "Your familiar is quite spirited," Grayson commented dryly as Poppy swooped overhead. Scarlett laughed, pulling him closer as they swayed to the music. "She thinks she's being subtle about playing matchmaker." "I heard that." Poppy wanted to shout, but she was too busy executing a perfect barrel roll between 2 crystal chandeliers. The pursuing garland created cascading waves of golden light, transforming the ballroom into a shimmering wonderland. Couples began spinning beneath the magical display, and Poppy noticed with satisfaction how the romantic atmosphere had everyone drawing closer together. The evergreen wish's glow intensified with each pass, its light catching the glitter trail and creating prismatic patterns across the dance floor. Even Milo and Rune seemed to forget their original mission, caught up in the impromptu aerial ballet. Finally, After ensuring maximum dramatic effect, Poppy allowed her flight path to arc toward the evergreen wish itself. She landed atop the artifact with practiced grace, the persistent garland now draped artfully across her shoulders like a hard-won medal. Below, Scarlett and Grayson shared another kiss, their figures haloed by the falling sparkles from her performance. Perfect, Poppy thought, her scales settling into a pleased rose-gold shimmer. Though, that gentleman's pocket watch chain did look particularly fetching, and it would round out her collection nicely. After all, what was a matchmaking victory without a few souvenirs? She caught Milo watching her with knowing amusement. The crow cawed something that sounded suspiciously like kleptomaniac, but Poppy ignored him. She was a collector of fine things, thank you very much. And if those things happened to be borrowed from unsuspecting party guests, well, that was merely efficient resource allocation. The garland gave an affectionate squeeze, and Poppy allowed herself a small dragon smile. Everything had worked out exactly according to plan, even the parts she'd made up as she went along. Milo hopped along the dessert table's crystalline edge, his glossy black feathers puffed with self-importance. "Watch and learn, brother dear," he called to Rune, using his wing to deliberately knock a cascade of enchanted sugar crystals onto the unsuspecting witch below. That's how I engineered the whole thing. A little chaos here, a strategic mishap there. "You knocked over a bookshelf and nearly concussed our master," Rune observed dryly from his perch on an ornate silver candelabra. The more reserved crow maintained perfect posture, a stark contrast to his brother's theatrical strutting. "Ah, but it got him to the library, didn't it?" Milo launched into an elaborate impression of Grayson, hunching his shoulders and affecting a deep, brooding stare. "Oh, woe is me, I'm cursed forever. Wait, is that an attractive witch with a dragon?" He flapped his wings dramatically, nearly singeing his tail feathers on a floating candle. Rune's measured response died in his throat as Milo suddenly squawked, "That little thief!" The impulsive crow lost his balance, tumbling beak first toward the crystal punch bowl. Only a last-second wing flap saved him from a very undignified swim. "Look! Our candlestick. The one from the winter solstice feast." Sure enough, there sat their prized silver candlestick, gleaming amid Poppy's not-so-secret treasure pile behind a potted magical poinsettia. The miniature dragon had arranged her ill-gotten gains with surprising artistry, sorted by both shininess and size. "Perhaps we should focus on more meaningful observations," Rune suggested, turning his attention to where Grayson stood with Scarlett. The witch was adjusting their master's collar, and for once frost wasn't creeping across the fabric at her touch. Instead, a warm golden glow seemed to emanate from Grayson's newly uncursed magic. Notice how his aura has shifted too. Speaking of meaningful contributions, Milo interrupted, abandoning his surveillance of Poppy's hoard to hop excitedly on his perch. "Did I ever tell you about my masterful mistletoe manipulation? Pure genius, really. See, I waited until precisely the right moment." "You got tangled in it and fell on Grayson's head," Rune reminded him. "A calculated move." The timing was, Milo's defense cut off as both crows spotted Poppy emerging from her hiding spot, methodically rearranging her treasures by what appeared to be a complex ranking system of sparkle factor. "Now listen carefully," Milo whispered, using his wing to draw elaborate diagrams in some spilled punch. "If we create a diversion by the enchanted ice sculpture, while you sweep in from the east window." "Your tactical genius is overwhelming," Rune deadpanned, though he couldn't help leaning in to study the surprisingly detailed punch sketches. Above them, the Evergreen Wish captured their plotting in miniature crystal scenes, each facet reflecting a different angle of the familiar schemes. In one surface, Milo's exaggerated Grayson impression played on repeat, while another showed Rune's perfect eye roll in crystalline detail. Their strategic planning session ended abruptly as a glitter-trailing missile in the form of Poppy shot between them, sending both crows tumbling through the air. "Unfair! Unfair!" Milo shrieked, dodging a playful puff of sparkly smoke. "Fire breath is cheating. We had a no-fire breath agreement." We most certainly did not, Rune corrected, attempting to maintain his dignity while pursuing their aerial troublemaker through the floating candles. Their chase created an inadvertent light show, shadows and sparkles dancing across the ballroom as they weaved between the magical decorations. The pursuing crows ducked and wove through the enchanted ceiling's snowfall, now mixed with Poppy's trailing glitter, to create a mesmerizing swirl of magic and light. Below them, couples paused their dancing to admire the impromptu display, completely unaware of the property dispute playing out overhead. I orchestrated their first meeting, Milo called as they circled the dance floor. You knocked over his coffee, Rune countered, narrowly avoiding a tinsel garland. I created romantic ambiance, Poppy shot back, her scales shifting to a smug gold as she looped around a crystal chandelier. You set fire to the library ghost. Their debate ended abruptly as an animated garland, perhaps tired of their bickering, wrapped around all three familiars at once. They found themselves bundled together above the dance floor, still arguing in fierce whispers. My coffee incident was clearly the catalyst. My quiet observation and subtle guidance. My superior treasure-finding skills. Below them, Scarlett and Grayson swayed to the music, completely oblivious to their familiar's predicament. The evergreen wish pulsed softly, capturing one final scene in its crystalline depths. 3 magical creatures tangled in holiday decorations, each convinced they were the true matchmaker of the season. Well, Rune sighed, as dignified as one could be while wrapped in enchanted pine needles, at least we can agree on one thing. That I'm the cleverest? Milo asked hopefully. That we have better taste in humans than they do in familiars, Poppy declared, her tail curling smugly despite their predicament. Rune just shook his head, watching as snowflakes and glitter continued to rain down on the happy couple below. Sometimes, he mused, magic worked best when everyone thought they were the one behind it. Through the shimmering aftermath of magical chaos, Scarlett stood with her hands on her hips, facing down a thoroughly unrepentant Poppy. The miniature dragon's scales flickered between smug gold and defiant red, glitter cascading from her wings with each indignant flap. Really? The chandelier crystals too? Scarlett gestured at the growing pile of sparkly contraband beneath Poppy's perch. Those were enchanted by my great-grandmother. Poppy's tail curled into a question mark. Mine now. Finders keepers. She preened, sending another shower of glitter onto the ballroom floor. Beside them, Grayson wrestled with a particularly stubborn strand of enchanted garland that had wrapped itself around Milo and Rune like tinsel-covered mummies. The crow's muffled squawks of protest only seemed to encourage the decoration's enthusiasm. A little help here? Grayson shot Scarlett an amused look. Your mother's garlands seem to have developed a taste for poultry. That's what they get for chasing me, Poppy declared, nose in the air. Through the manor's frost-decorated windows, magical lights pulsed in soft waves of color, synchronized with the steady, loving glow of the evergreen wish. The artifact sat in its place of honor, casting emerald reflections across the grand ballroom's chaos-strewn floor. Scattered crystals caught the light like fallen stars, while trails of glitter traced the familiar's wild chase in swooping, sparkling arcs. You know, Grayson mused, finally freeing a disgruntled Milo, I think the mess actually improves the decor. Don't let Mother hear you say that. But Scarlett had to admit he was right. The scattered decorations and dusting of magical residue gave the formal space a lived-in warmth, like the difference between a perfect portrait and a cherished snapshot. Across the room, Arthur and Marion watched the scene unfold. His pocket watch chimed softly, its tone matching the gentle ring of her charm bracelet. The magical resonance drew their eyes to meet, sharing decades of understanding in a single glance. They remind me of us, Marion whispered, her bracelet glowing a warm rose gold. Though we caused far more damage at our first gala. Arthur's eyes crinkled. As I recall, you set the punch bowl on fire. It was enchanted punch. How was I supposed to know it was flammable? Above them, the manor's collection of enchanted portraits whispered and giggled, sharing centuries of romantic gossip. Ms. Grimsworth's ghost materialized briefly near the entrance, tutting at a crooked wreath, before adjusting it with spectral precision. "Much better," the ghost librarian declared, nodding approvingly at Scarlett and Grayson before fading away. The manor's enchanted ceiling continued its gentle snowfall, crystalline flakes drifting through floating candles before dissolving into sparks of light. The effect created a shimmering curtain that transformed the ballroom into something out of a fairy tale, albeit one where the dragon was pocket-sized, and more interested in stealing silverware than hoarding gold. Suddenly, the evergreen wish pulsed brighter, projecting shifting images across the ballroom walls. There was Scarlett approaching Grayson at the enchanted cup, determination written across her face. The scenes flowed like water, their first awkward attempts at couple-like behavior, tangled in holiday decorations, trapped in Marion's snow globe, researching in the library while their familiars caused havoc in the background. "Oh no," Scarlett groaned, watching their mistletoe kiss play out in magical technicolor. "Is this really necessary?" "Consider it a highlight reel." Grayson pulled her closer, his magic flowing freely now that the curse was broken. Where their magical signatures met, aurora-like patterns swirled across the ceiling, her bright, optimistic energy dancing with his deeper, steadier power in perfect harmony. The familiars finally settled into their respective positions, though not without a final exchange of meaningful looks. Poppy arranged herself atop her ill-gotten collection like a queen on her throne, while Milo and Rune claimed the chandelier, their feathers still sporting traces of tinsel and glitter. "I still say we deserve most of the credit," Milo announced, preening a bit of garland from his wing. Rune just shook his head, but his usual stoic expression held a hint of satisfaction. Through the windows, the cursed grove was visible on the horizon, its twisted silhouette softened by distance and fresh snow. The trees swayed gently in a wind that couldn't quite reach the manor, their movement almost like a bow, acknowledging that sometimes curses were just love stories waiting to be properly told. The manor itself seemed to approve, its ancient magical foundations humming with contentment. Generations of Harper magic resonated with the new energy of Grayson's freed power, creating harmonies that made the very air sparkle. "Your family's home likes me," Grayson observed, surprised. "Of course it does." Scarlett grinned. "It has excellent taste." A sprig of mistletoe, suspiciously fresh and probably Marion's doing, materialized above them. Their familiars watched with varying degrees of smugness as Scarlett and Grayson came together for another kiss, this one unhurried and sweet. Holiday magic swirled around them, punctuated by Poppy's dramatic gagging sounds and Milo's enthusiastic wing clapping. "Worth all the chaos?" Scarlett asked against his lips. "Every enchanted garland and glitter explosion," Grayson confirmed, then added with a smirk, "though we might want to check on your mother's silverware before Poppy adds it to her collection." "Mine," came the predictable response from above, followed by the distinctive sound of a silver spoon being added to a growing hoard. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment. You can also visit me at https://winvalentine.com to stay up to date.